I will remind members of the public that the Commission does not tolerate any disruption or outbursts of any kind. Please silence your mobile devices that may sound off during these proceedings. And when speaking before the Commission, if you care to, do state your name for the record. I'd like to take roll at this time. Commission President Hillis.
Here.
Commissioner Fong.
Here.
Commissioner Koppel.
Here.
Commissioner Melgar.
Here.
And Commissioner Moore.
Here.
We do expect Commissioner Richards to arrive shortly and Commissioner Johnson to be absent today. Commissioners, first on your agenda is consideration of items proposed for continuance. Item 1, case number 2014-003160 CUA at 3314 Cesar Chavez Street. Conditional use authorization is proposed for continuance to January 18th, 2018. Item 2, case number 2015-005763 CUA at 247 17th Avenue. Conditional use authorization is proposed for continuance indefinitely. Item 3, case number 2016-005805 CUA at 430 Broadway Street. Conditional use authorization has been withdrawn. Further, Commissioners, under your regular calendar, item 8 for the residential expansion review. This informational presentation is being proposed for continuance indefinitely. I have no other items proposed for continuance. I had one item to speak to item 8 for the residential expansion threshold, but I believe it was to the subject matter rather than the continuance.
Okay, so we'll open it up for public comment on the items being proposed for continuance. Go ahead.
That's fine.
Sure, absolutely.
Okay. Good afternoon. Georgia Shudish. Here's a map that I was going to give you if we'd had the hearing today. I had Mr. Webster make it. It shows all the RH zones. Green is all the RH1, yellow's the red's the RH2, and blue's RH3. And so that's for you. And I will just say, even though it's continued indefinitely, you do have the ability as the Commission to deal with the numerical criteria. It's in the Planning Code. It says the Planning Commission may reduce the above numerical elements of the criteria in subsections B2B and B2C by up to 20% of their values should it deem the adjustment necessary to implement the intent of this section. So while this is all being jettisoned, I am trying the continuance. You do have a chance to do something even though this is continued indefinitely in the meantime, and that's my point, and here's the material on it. Thank you. Have a good day.
Thank you, Ms. Shudish. Any additional public comment on the items being proposed for continuance? Seeing none, we'll close public comment. Commissioner Koppel.
Motion to continue items 1, 2, 3 to the date specified and item number 8 indefinitely.
Okay. Second.
Thank you, Commissioners, on that motion to continue items, excuse me, as proposed. Commissioner Fong.
Aye.
Commissioner Koppel.
Aye.
Commissioner Melgar.
Aye.
Commissioner Moore.
Aye.
And Commissioner President Hillis.
Aye.
So moved, Commissioners. That motion passes unanimously 5-0. And places us on Commission matters. Item 4, Commission comments and questions.
Commissioner Moore.
Thank you to the Mayor's office or to the Mayor for organizing the pop-up yesterday at City Hall. It was a lovely experience. It was amazing to see the variety and quality of local makers, and I strongly encourage to do that more often, perhaps around Easter or any other holiday, because it animates the newest light code in a wonderful way, and the products are just amazing.
Thank you.
Seeing no other Commissioners' comments, Department matters. Item 5, Director's announcements.
Thank you. Commissioners, 2 announcements today. One, as you know, there's a proposal for 2 separate ballot measures that are being sought, that have been registered to seek signatures. One is related to Prop M in Central Soma. One is related to affordable housing and teacher housing. And just a reminder to staff and to commissions that at this point we can't take public positions on these measures. But secondly, both of these obviously will greatly affect our work. So if they do qualify for the ballot, we will schedule hearings in February to go over how it affects our work and do our normal objective analysis of those measures, because they will likely have a substantial impact on what we do and how we do our work in those areas. Secondly, related to the withdrawal of the residential expansion threshold, the department has decided to suspend our efforts with respect to the RET If you remember, we had multiple goals there. One was to redo or eliminate the tantamount to demolition, which we believe is currently very ineffective. We wanted to place more emphasis on the size and density of buildings and encouraged owners to build to their permitted density and to replace the demolition controls with something that was a little more clear for everyone to understand. We had a lot of community meetings, I think several dozen. We had many hearings here, and we just were not able to come to agreement. There was a lot of concern about the way we were doing it, what the goals were. Frankly, some of the disagreements were not totally clear to me, but nonetheless, we do think it's time to pull the plug. We will propose dealing with the demolition definition, and we will be focusing just on that rather than the other parts of the effort. I will say that some of those goals that we initially laid out will not be met by doing that, clearly. But at this point, it's probably the most prudent thing to do after spending 2 years on this. We need to kind of pick our battles. If you don't mind a little bit of an editorial comment, one of the very disappointing aspects of this process has been that there was some deliberate misinformation spread by members of the community to the point where they even admitted it was misinformation. And that's very disappointing to me. And it's one of those things that makes it hard to do our job, but also I guess it's a comment on the public discourse these days, on what's acceptable in the public discourse. And I will just say for the record that it's pretty disappointing that that is happening here at this time and place. Thank you. That concludes my comments.
Thank you. Commissioner Moore.
I have a question, Director William. I read the statement issued by Ms. Butkus from your department talking about a collaboration with DBI. That is something you kind of did not mention, but I would be interested in hearing you clarify that.
Yeah, I think the goal here is to combine efforts and make sure and basically have one definition for demolition between the two departments.
Is anybody helping as an arbitrator, because the two different definitions have been standing for many years and are often the reason for discontent and contradictory solutions? Is there an attempt to have somebody help you negotiate of where you have common ground?
Well, I think what our goal is to only have one definition and have it live in probably the building code, so that there's only one definition rather than having two separate definitions. So yeah, we will be in dialogue with them very extensively about that.
Commissioner Richards.
One of the most disappointing things coming out of this entire process, one, is that it ended, but two, really realizing that the building department doesn't follow its own processes. And I hope that whatever we come up with, whether it's a definition that sits in the planning code or the building code or both codes, that after we have our joint meeting with DBI, et cetera, we measure the effectiveness as to actually whether it's followed by the organization that has the definition. That was incredibly disappointing to see that they don't follow their own definition, their process.
Commissioner Moore, sorry.
Director William, I have one question for you. Have you been following the modular building of homeless housing in San Jose? Not today, perhaps, but at some other time, you could give us an update of how that would fit for us or it doesn't. I found it rather interesting. The solution looked kind of interesting, and it would be perhaps good for the Commission as well as the public to know of what other communities are doing.
We've been following a lot of modular housing and different technologies. Happy to talk about that in the future.
Thank you.
And I just want to say I attended a couple of the community meetings and the staff meetings, and I thought they were great and informative. I think the staff did a wonderful job at trying to advance this. I think the two kind of goals that were set out, one to figure out a better way to define demolition, and then building to the zoning density, were both great goals. That it's unfortunate it kind of got stymied in this process. So I appreciate your efforts and all the efforts by staff.
There's nothing further, Commissioners. We can move on to item 6, review of past events of the Board of Supervisors, Board of Appeals, and the Historic Preservation Commission.
Good afternoon, Commissioners. Aaron Starr, Manager of Legislative Affairs. I understand that you're on a tight timeline today, so I emailed you the report. I'm here if you have any questions about it. I will just note that the two CU appeals at the Board of Supervisors this week, one for the project at 948, 950 Lombard Street, and the other one for the MCD at 2161 Irving Street, were both upheld by the Board of Supervisors, and that concludes my remarks.
Thank you.
Good afternoon,
But there was just clarity. Mr. Starr, did you have a question?
The appellants were not upheld.
No,
We
I'm
were
sorry, the
upheld.
CUs were upheld,
Okay,
not the
thanks.
appellants.
That's what I thought.
Great, thank you.
Good afternoon, Commissioners. Tim Fry, Department staff, here to share with you a few items from yesterday's Historic Preservation Commission hearing. On October 19th, I shared with you the initiation of 3 local public schools, Theodore Roosevelt Middle School, George Washington High School, and Sunshine School. All 3 of those received a positive recommendation to be forwarded to the Board of Supervisors at yesterday's HPC hearing, and those hearings will be scheduled sometime in the new year. The Commission did initiate a new designation at yesterday's hearing. If I could get the overhead, please. This is the Phillips Building located at 246 First Street. Designed in 1930 by architects Myers and Klinkart. It's a rare Art Deco loft building in downtown San Francisco, and the property owners are initiating the local designation. The Commission unanimously approved the initiation, and that will be scheduled for a second hearing, likely in January. That concludes my remarks, unless you have any questions. Thanks.
Thank you. Commissioner Richards?
Just one thing on Mr. Starr's prior report. If you haven't seen the tape on the appeal for Lombard at the Board of Supervisors, it's a very interesting watch. If you see Supervisor Peskin talk about exactly some of the issues that we've been seeing happening. So I'd encourage everybody to watch that.
There is no report from the Board of Appeals, so we can move on to general public comment. At this time, members of the public may address the Commission on items of interest to the public that are within the subject matter jurisdiction of the Commission, except agenda items. With respect to agenda items, your opportunity to address the Commission will be afforded when the item is reached in the meeting. Each member of the public may address the Commission for up to 3 minutes. I did have several speaker cards.
Thank you, Jonas. Janet Fowler, Georgia Shudish, Brian Clofus, and Richard Frisbee. And Ms. Hester, if you'd like to speak, come on up. In any order.
I don't think Ms. Fowler's here. I just want to say, I was going to show you some photos. You probably don't want to see them you know what the problem is. We all know what the problem is. I respect the staff greatly, and I want to make that clear, since I don't want to be categorized as spreading false rumors. I don't think I did that. My concern has always been the issue of demolition and how much should be demolished. I think the current criteria in Section 317 is really worth looking at in terms of demolition. And that was my concern. I respect the staff. I get what they were trying to do. I didn't understand it because I don't think it dealt with the tantamount to demolition as it should. I still think that's a decent concept to work with. And I think one definition of demolition may not be fair to people that want to do legitimate, honest-to-God alterations. And that's my position. Thank you, and we can talk about it again in the new year. And I really do hope that you'll consider dealing with the numerical criteria that you have a right to do. And I hope the residential flat policy stays, because I think that's really important. And I also hope that you'll look at upping the number that's also in the in the criteria. I think the idea that keeping getting rid of that affordability thing for the RH1 is a very important thing. You've had a lot of projects that are just over that number, $50,000 over. 323 Cumberland and 653 28th come to immediate mind. Those things maybe should not have been torn down, or they should have been looked at in a different way. So that's all I'm going to say. I want to thank Ms. Waddy and Ms. Butkus and Ms. Bendix. I do think that their heart was in the right place, and I'm sorry if everybody's upset, but that's the way it goes. Thank you.
Commissioner, if you mind, I know that this is not a dialogue time, but Ms. Judas, I wasn't referring to any of
No,
the comments.
I-
And staff, and I just want to be clear, staff has really appreciated working with you on this. There are other members of the community that I was referring to that had a different story.
And I understand that.
And just want to be clear, it was not directed at you. So,
Okay, I
just
understand, and I
wanna let you
appreciate
know
that, and I appreciate that very much, because I feel very strongly about that whole problem. It's only been 4 years we've been talking about this. Thank you.
Thank you. Commissioner Richards?
Oh, no, I'll wait till the end. When
Okay, sorry. Yep, sorry. Next speaker, please.
Good afternoon, Commissioners. I'm Richard Frisbee from the Laurel Heights Improvement Association. I'd like to discuss the urban design guidelines, which appears in some way to be mimicking some of the residential expansion threshold problems. In the interest of time, though, I'm only going to discuss one issue because I think it's representative, and that's the makeup of the External Advisory Committee. I have a lengthy letter from Jeff Joslin which extols the purpose of the group. To quote, "I'm sorry you found the process unsatisfactory. There have been a huge number of stakeholders involved," and it goes on. So let's just take a brief look at the stakeholders that were actually included in the advisory committee. I think most people would consider neighborhood groups to be major stakeholders. Of the 45 members, exactly 3 neighborhood associations were represented. 3. That's less than 5%. The developers alone had a greater representation on that advisory group than did the neighborhood associations. In fact, representatives from developers, architects, and real estate groups made up approximately 50% of your advisory group, whereas neighborhood associations represented less than 5%. And in fact, the largest neighborhood coalition in the city, the Coalition of San Francisco Neighborhoods, wasn't even invited to be a member. So if a farmer were to develop a new hen house, I doubt his advisory committee would consist of 3 hens, 5 foxes, and 25 predators who thought chicken was a good dinner. And yet that's exactly what the planning department's advisory group looks like. On September 25th, the Coalition of San Francisco Neighborhoods sent a detailed 13-page letter to the Planning Commission addressing concerns about a draft of the urban design guidelines. The letter began, "Dear Commissioners," so I can only assume that each of you has received a copy. To date, December 7th, 10 weeks later, we have received no response whatsoever. Not even the courtesy of a reply that a letter was received. Thank you.
Thank you. Next speaker, please.
Sue Hester, I want to talk about demolitions. I think you should acknowledge you have a former member of the Building Inspection Commission on this commission, and that solution of the demolition issue involves DBI as well as the planning department. DBI staff is part of the problem, in my opinion, and not the commission, because the commission doesn't see things. And I've been dealing with demolitions and office use permits for 40 years. And there is a problem, and there needs to be a discussion, and it should involve DBI, some DBI commissioners, as well as DBI staff, as well as planning staff, as well as anyone that's interested on this commission. This is a big issue, and it deserves some attention that people that are not developers and attorneys for developers and architects from developers, but the public is involved in. And I would suggest that there's a solution somewhere. There has to be a solution somewhere. DBI follows the Uniform Building Code for a lot of definitions. They have their own definitions in the San Francisco wraparound of the Uniform Building Code. But the whole way demolitions are manipulated and the whole whole way square foot is manipulated is a substantial problem. I don't think the commission is very well aware of this unless you do this in your private life. Commissioner Moore does it, and I know she does, and Commissioner Melgar used to do it in her life as a former commissioner for DBI. But the rest of you don't really understand how much this is a really threshold issue for the survivability of residential housing and affordable residential housing. It's really substantial. And I don't say you can go start things today, but there should be some discussion involving several commissioners and staff as well. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Any additional general public comment?
Hi, my name is Brian Clofus. I'm here today to talk about a report that the Planning Department wrote in January of this year titled Housing for Families with Children. It shows that the city is building some subsidized housing for very low-income families and that there is enough housing for the ultra-wealthy. But what about the middle-income families or even middle-income people with kids? In SF, the median family income is $108,000 a year, and banks will typically give you a loan for the house value of 4 to 5 times your annual income, assuming you have saved enough for the down payment. This means that the median family who makes $108,000 a year can afford a $500,000 home, which we all know doesn't exist in San Francisco, and probably not even in the inner part of the Bay Area. So how do we help middle-income people here in San Francisco? Luckily, the report has several suggestions. To quote from page 32, one reason that housing for the missing middle is no longer being built is because of zoning restrictions. Current zoning restricts 72% of our privately owned parcels to single-family homes and duplexes, putting the burden of population growth for both jobs and housing on the remaining 28%, end quote. To me, this doesn't really seem fair to push all the development to the east side of the city, with the west side building nothing but reaping all the property value increases. Also from page 32 of the report, one tool to change this restriction is to allow neighborhoods to be zoned by the form that the building takes, also known as form-based zoning. This tool allows the city to regulate based on the appearances, height, bulk, etc., and not simply based on the number of units, end quote. I encourage this Planning Commission to read or reread this report, switch to form-based zoning for all land in San Francisco, and also upzone all the single-family residential districts in San Francisco. Only by following your own recommendations will housing be built for the missing middle. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Next speaker, please, if there are any. Seeing none, we'll close general public comment. Commissioner Richards?
I have 3 things to say as hearing the first 3 members of the public who are speaking in public comment first. Now that the residential expansion threshold has been actually taken away, withdrawn, I think we really need to look at the demonstratively unaffordable portion of Section 317, as Ms. Shudish had mentioned. I'm seeing perfectly sound houses in my neighborhood being demolished and monster houses being replaced with them. And if the goal is to actually keep affordable homes that are existing, Section 317, the demonstrably unaffordable, is not helping out in any way, shape, or form. Secondly, for the person who spoke from the Coalition of San Francisco Neighborhoods, my apologies. We get hundreds of emails a week. If you have a copy of the email you sent, can you hand it over the rail? I'd love to take a look at it. And then the third one, Ms. Hester, I know you categorized Commissioner Moore and others as being professionals going through these rules of rigor. I recently, and I'm currently going through some issues with DBI, and I have to tell you, I get some of my neighbors and some of the members of the public's anger over the way we're treated for the very minor infractions that that were called out on. I know there's a public safety issue, but half an inch between the center of my toilet bowl and the wall is not something that I would call a huge public safety issue to have to rip a whole bathroom back out. when I see serial permitting where buildings are entirely demolished. So I walk away, and I'll say this with the utmost candor. I feel there are two sets of rules, one for me and one for everybody else who's connected, and I think I'm reflecting the public's anger at this right now. I'm also going through another issue that I can't even begin to tell you the craziness that it's involved and the stuff that I'm getting back from the Department of Building Inspection. So I can't wait to have a joint hearing with DBI because it's time that we get rid of these kind of things that are happening.
Thank you.
Commissioners, if there's nothing further, we can move on to your regular calendar. Item 7, case number 2016-003164 CWP for the 2017 Healthcare Services Master Plan informational presentation.
Good afternoon. Good afternoon, Commissioners. This one's on too. Lisa Chen of Department Staff. The item before you today is an informational presentation on the update to the Healthcare Services Master Plan as required under Planning Code Section 342. The plan is a collaborative effort of the San Francisco Department of Public Health and the Planning Department. Before I begin, I would like to introduce our agency partner, Sneha Patil of DPH, to provide opening remarks.
Good afternoon, Commissioners. I'm Sneha Patil with the Department of Public Health. We have been working in collaboration with Lisa and the Planning Department for over a year on updating the Healthcare Services Master Plan. And when this was created in 2013, the main purpose and goal was to promote equitable distribution and access to healthcare services in the city, in particular for low-income and vulnerable populations. The plan has two key roles. First, it serves as a long-range policy and planning document that provides information about San Francisco's healthcare delivery landscape. And second, it provides a way to evaluate certain medical projects against the policy recommendations of the plan. We know that since the creation of the plan, we've seen several changes in our healthcare delivery landscape, including the implementation of the Affordable Care Act, which has expanded coverage to more than 140,000 residents in the city. And we've also seen other changes, such as the decline in the number of skilled nursing facilities and beds that we have, which provide long-term care services for our growing senior population. So this plan really provides an opportunity for us to identify what are some of the emerging and changing trends in healthcare and health facilities. And we look forward to continuing this discussion as we update the plan and bring it to you next year for adoption. Thank you.
Okay, so today's presentation will start with some context on the health facility landscape in San Francisco, followed by a high-level overview of the 2017 master plan. We'll be returning early next year for an initiation hearing, as well as a joint adoption hearing with the Health Commission. San Francisco has a rich landscape of medical facilities that you can probably see with your own eyes when you're throughout the city. Our healthcare facilities serve people of all backgrounds, incomes, and stages of life. This diversity is reflective of our values as a city. Our policymakers and residents have repeatedly affirmed their commitment to ensuring access to health care for all San Franciscans through policies and programs such as Healthy San Francisco, which is a nationally recognized model of providing care to low-income and underinsured residents. In terms of our planning code, this diversity of facilities really boils down to three core categories. The most visible of these is, of course, our hospitals and medical centers. We have 7 hospitals at 12 locations providing inpatient, outpatient, and emergency care, typically for short-term stays. Health and medical services form the broadest category of facilities, essentially covering all outpatient care. This includes our nonprofit community clinics, private doctors, dentists, outpatient surgery, acupuncturists, and the like. Residential care facilities form the last major category, providing longer-term 24-hour lodging and health care, including skilled nursing facilities, residential behavioral health, and other long-term care. Citywide, these facilities comprise roughly 25 million square feet of space. Healthcare is the city's 4th largest industry, providing around 40,000 jobs, which represents a 15% increase from 2010 to 2015. Notably, growth in this sector has been fairly steady over time, even during periods of recession. Much of the current medical facility pipeline involves renovations or reconstructions of our major hospitals, partially in response to seismic upgrade requirements at the state. Currently, there's about 1.3 million square feet of medical space in the pipeline, including almost 1 million square feet at the CPMC, Van Ness, and Mission Bernal hospitals. Over the last 10 years, roughly 1.6 million square feet of medical space was completed, about 80% of which was at hospitals. Going forward, the 2013 Healthcare Services Master Plan projected that we will need about 1 to 1.5 million square feet of medical space by 2035. The plan actually specified that much of this growth may occur in outpatient facilities distributed throughout our city rather than at centralized hospitals. This could improve access to care and fit in better with existing neighborhoods. As part of the 2017 plan, we are revising these projections. In recent years, a related trend is that we have seen a rise in for-profit outpatient facilities such as One Medical and Go Health Urgent Care. Many of these facilities are small enough that they don't appear in our development pipeline, around 3,000 square feet or less, and they're locating in neighborhood commercial districts and other locations that are convenient to where people live and work. We've had an early round of stakeholder interviews with health providers, commercial brokers, merchants, and neighborhood associations, and I've heard differing opinions about these facilities. On the one hand, that we have heard that they may have a deadening impact on the street, though it's worth noting that the design quality varies significantly. And on the other hand, we've heard that these facilities can generate foot traffic and can be a welcome addition to neighborhoods, especially given the increasing vacancy rates in some corridors. They can also provide more convenient access to health care, potentially relieving pressure on other medical facilities. As part of the plan update, we are exploring some policy recommendations to help mitigate some of these impacts with the goal of creating a balance between our growing healthcare needs and our desire to support vibrant commercial districts. There are a number of other trends that we are driving what we're seeing in the pipeline and what we expect to see going forward. First, we do expect the industry to continue growing to keep pace with population growth, and in particular, the rapid increase in the number of seniors, which will comprise more than 1/4 of our population by 2060. We're also seeing a movement towards building outpatient facilities, not just private facilities, but also in our hospitals, community clinics, and other health providers. This is a way of reducing the cost of providing care and has been spurred by the Affordable Care Act, which, as has been mentioned, increased funding and insurance coverage for preventive health. We're also seeing a number of trends and innovations in the healthcare industry, such as telemedicine. And finally, we're seeing projected shortages of healthcare workers due to caps in our current medical training programs, projected population growth, and the number of doctors reaching retirement age. This is not an exhaustive list, but all of these trends do speak to a continued and growing demand for healthcare services. In response to these trends, the Healthcare Services Master Plan was developed, recognizing that we need to look beyond individual facilities or institutions and plan for our healthcare needs at a holistic level to ensure that we have access to these critical services in the future. The purpose of the plan is to identify current and future healthcare needs in San Francisco with a focus on improving access for vulnerable populations, to recommend an appropriate and equitable geographic distribution of facilities, to provide a framework for reviewing future medical use development projects, and to provide other recommendations related to healthcare services. The genesis of the plan was in 2010 with the passage of the Healthcare Services Master Plan Ordinance. Over the following 2 years, DPH and the Planning Department developed the first Healthcare Services Master Plan. And then last year, we initiated the update to the plan in accordance with the ordinance. There are three core components of the plan: the assessments, the consistency determination guidelines, and the supporting legislation and recommendations. The assessments form the core of the plan and provide a data-driven, long-term look at our healthcare needs now and in the future. The four core components are our community health needs assessment, providing information on the current and future health needs of the city; the health systems trends assessment, which looks at not only our health system here locally, but also the state and federal level; the capacity and gap assessment, which looks specifically at San Francisco facilities and their bed capacity and their ability to absorb emergency demands; and then the land use assessment, which looks at land use trends. As part of the update, we are providing new information on health needs and also focusing on some priority healthcare needs, including skilled nursing facilities and behavioral health. We'll be providing more information on the assessments at a future hearing. The consistency determination guidelines are used to evaluate new medical facilities to ensure that they are on balance consistent with the goals of the plan. All facilities that are greater than 5,000 square feet or 10,000 square feet for a change of use are required to apply to the planning department and DPH to ensure consistency with the plan. As part of this process, we are consolidating and streamlining the list of guidelines, and we're also looking at process changes to create more alignment between this process and the Institutional Master Plan, or IMP. We would, through that process, apply the requirement to institutions rather than individual facilities in order to increase the impact of the plan. There have been 3 projects that have been through the process: Health Rate 360, Jewish Home, and Planned Parenthood. And as you're aware, they were all found to be consistent with the plan. The last core component of the plan is the supporting legislation and recommendations. These are actually technically separate from the plan, but we're bringing them to the policymakers at the same time as adoption. The supporting legislation falls in 3 core categories. One are modifications to the actual healthcare services master plan process and ordinance to increase efficacy and efficiency, policies to streamline development of high priority healthcare services or facilities, including skilled nursing, and policies to facilitate the development of outpatient facilities or health and medical services. These could include stronger design review processes to ensure fit with neighborhood character and other policies to mitigate impacts on the ground floor. We'll be providing further recommendations at future hearings. In terms of next steps, we're in the midst of our outreach process. So as noted, we've conducted stakeholder interviews with a range of stakeholders. We are in the process of scheduling briefings with key stakeholders and advocacy organizations. We're going to be hosting a workshop with healthcare providers later this month, followed by an online survey to get even broader feedback. In terms of the public hearings, we are going to be having hearings here at the Planning Commission, at the Health Commission, and the Board of Supervisors, and then there's a public comment period on the plan itself. Here's our timeline and next steps. So we've already conducted the stakeholder interviews and the draft of the data assessments. We're in the midst of doing other outreach, and then we anticipate that the plan will be brought for adoption early next year. This concludes staff presentation, and we're on hand for any questions.
Great, thank you, Ms. Chen. We'll first open this up for public comment. Any public comment on this item?
Teresa Flandrick with Senior and Disability Action. You've no doubt heard about CPMC and closing of the SNF facility, and what I'm really concerned with is I have had experiences with both my landlady and my upstairs neighbor in terms of one in 2006 being able to go to a SNF facility right after having surgery on her broken arm, and she was able to go home. However, the social worker was already looking for some sort of home for her to go into since she did live alone. However, because we could show that she would have support, namely all of her tenants in the same building she lived, that she could go home, and she did. But it was really important that she had the rehabilitation that was part of the SNF unit. 4 years later, when my upstairs neighbor, Elaine, was hospitalized and was then ended up being sent to a board and care home, which was an inappropriate place for where she was at. There were real issues with communication between the hospital, the insurance, and what her real needs were. We need these facilities in order for people to return home. That would be the ideal, to age in place. And when that can't happen, we need to make sure we have assisted living places in our city that take care of the elders that built the city. And so I'm really glad that it sounds like this master plan will expand on all of these things, especially looking at then residential care. There are places that are closing right now. We at Senior and Disability Disability Action have received calls from a place in the Mission that once housed 16 seniors that had to close. And where will they go? There is nothing else here that would be affordable. And learning that the nearest place might be in San Mateo County, we can do better than that. So I'm really glad that we are taking a look at all of the medical support systems that are in place and are not in place so we can do something about it. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Flandrick. Any additional public comment on this item? Seeing none, we'll close public comment. Commissioners, any questions or comments? Commissioner Moore.
Since this is jumping on us without any preparatory reading, there was an offer to have follow-up meeting with the department itself. I would like to do that because it is just too complicated to sort it all out and do it justice. I think it is a great step in the right direction. The devil is in the details, so I myself would like to schedule a meeting, and any of the other commissioner, up to 3, could join such a meeting.
Yeah, I would also like to join the meeting. I'm particularly interested in the distribution of healthcare facilities across, all from smaller ones to larger ones by neighborhood, and focused on, cultural groups or ethnic groups within the city, and also age. So it'd be great to have that analysis. There is a lack of facilities on the east side of town, particularly southeast, and I'd like to see how the department is thinking about that in terms of new facilities. Thank you.
Thanks. Commissioner Richards.
I too would like to be a part of that meeting. One of the things that jumps out at me, there's been an awful lot of work put into this, and I know the genesis of this was back when we had the Cathedral Hill Hotel with Cathedral Hill CPMC campus, as well as St. Luke's issue. And it, I guess, started in July of 2011, according to the update here. With some of the things that we've seen in the last few years, I think the environment may have shifted so that when we're actually looking at the ordinance and the legislation and what we'd like to have contained in a plan, I think we should definitely make sure that we take a look at the shift in how healthcare is being delivered, especially with these neighborhood centers that you discussed so aptly when we actually do this. So I'm interested to see where and when those might be incorporated into this.
Commissioner Moore, did you have a follow-up?
I had a follow-up, but perhaps we should just leave in, for the essence of time, leave it for the discussions we'll have with the department. There are a number of issues, but we can have the meeting and then report back to the rest of the commission for those who don't have time to join us.
I think that would work. Thank you very much. And thank you to staff, too, for the presentation.
Commissioners, item 8 has been continued indefinitely, placing us on item 9 for case number 2017-010001, IMP for the Golden Gate University. This is the institutional master plan.
Good afternoon, President Hillis, Commissioners, Andrew Perry of Department staff. Before you today is an informational item regarding an institutional master plan for Golden Gate University. Post-secondary educational institutions are required to have a current IMP on file with the planning department to describe the existing and anticipated future development of that institution. The IMP hearing shall be for the receipt of public testimony only and shall in no way constitute an approval or disapproval of the IMP itself or of any facility described therein. The IMP shall be considered accepted when the Planning Commission hearing has closed. Golden Gate University is a nonprofit private institution that offers a range of undergraduate and graduate degrees, primarily in law and business-related disciplines. The university traces its history back well over a century to evening lectures and law courses provided through the YMCA Evening College, and the university today remains focused on providing educational opportunities for working professionals. As such, the majority of Golden Gate's courses are scheduled during evening hours, and the university's location at 536 Mission Street within the Transbay Center District further supports their mission with convenient access for working professionals in the surrounding downtown area and with proximate access to a number of public transportation options and routes. Golden Gate University's last IMP submittal was accepted in 2015, and while typically new IMP hearings are only required every 10 years, they are also required whenever there is a significant revision. In the interest of brevity, I will focus on those changes that have occurred or have been proposed since the last IMP filing. First, the university previously housed much of its administrative support and academic service functions within the adjacent 40 Jesse Street building. However, since the last IMP, the university has now consolidated all of these functions within their main 536 Mission Street campus building. The university has entered into a lease agreement with a tenant for the 40 Jesse Street building with occupancy expected early next year. Second, although a majority of Golden Gate University's students are working professionals, the university was interested in evaluating the demand for student housing among its full-time students. The report found a need for 316 beds currently, and that is expected to grow to 510 beds by the 2020-2021 academic year. As such, the university is currently exploring a potential lease option for student housing at the 333 12th Street project with panoramic interests. Commissioners, as you may recall from a recent IMP hearing for the San Francisco Art Institute, this is the same project where that institution is also considering a lease. At this time, Golden Gate University and SFAI are under consideration as the main tenants for the project. The 333 12th Street project is located only 2 miles away from Golden Gate University's campus, with many public transit options and bicycle routes to travel between the sites. Again, as a reminder, this IMP today is for the receipt of public testimony only and does not constitute a project approval, including project approval for that 333 12th Street project. That project was approved by this commission approximately 1 year ago as a residential housing project utilizing the state's density bonus law. The project sponsor, however, has submitted a new request for conditional use authorization to allow that project to proceed as student housing. A separate conditional use authorization hearing will be held on that matter. The department has not received any public comment on this most recent IMP submittal, and the department finds the IMP to contain all necessary information and recommends that the commission accept the IMP as complete following the close of public testimony today. That concludes my presentation, and I am available for questions. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Mr. Perry. Is there a representative from Golden Gate University here? Mr. Welcome.
Thank you. Good afternoon, Commissioners. My name is Mike Krapersky. I'm the Director of Business Services and Facilities for Golden Gate University, and I'm glad to be back in front of you once again. In accordance with Planning Code Section 304.5, the university has filed the institutional master plan with the city. This new plan has not changed all that much from what had been previously on file. Just to recap, the university owns 2 properties in San Francisco. Our main facility is at 536 Mission Street, and a smaller property that we extensively remodeled about 8 years ago is located at 40 Jesse, directly behind the Mission Street building. In late 2015 and early 2016, we vacated 40 Jesse and consolidated all of our operations into our facility at 536 Mission. This has made us more efficient in our use of space and has also given us the opportunity to repurpose the 40 Jesse building. We have since leased it to a commercial tenant, and their TI work is currently underway. During this current year, we've been tackling the questions that center around student housing and whether the university should provide in some form housing for our students, in particular our law students and our international students, who tend to be our majority of our daytime students, our full-time students. Based on these questions and the dialogue that ensued, we started an in-depth exploratory process. This took the form of meeting with consultants who specialize in student housing, as well as focus groups with our students and others, online surveys, one-on-one sessions with a variety of stakeholders, as well as numerous other meetings in which the pros and cons of student housing were discussed and dissected. The initial findings are indeed mixed. The housing study that we commissioned this past summer indicates that there may be an appetite for housing and has pegged that number as high as 510 beds by academic year 2020-2021. But we also know that most of our students are working adults who currently reside in the Bay Area and who are already settled in their own homes. So for them, student housing is not seen as a necessity. And then when looking at the cost for student housing, we're also seeing tremendous price sensitivity, especially amongst our international students. That then drives them away from housing in the city into less expensive options further away. It's not uncommon to find our students 4 or 5 deep sharing a 1-bedroom apartment in Fremont or other East Bay locations. Also, as part of our due diligence, we've been in discussions with Panoramic Interest about their planned new project at 333 12th Street. There might be opportunities for student housing there. Our dialogue with them continues. We have not made any decision as to the direction we will follow, as we are currently also engaged in an internal, detailed strategic planning process that will help us shape our decisions and our future course of action. And finally, as many of you are keenly aware, our property at 536 Mission is located in the Trans-Bay Development Area and is a highly prized parcel. While we don't have any current plans to move, sell, or to take any other action, our ongoing fiduciary responsibilities requires us to always remain vigilant for opportunities that can better serve the university community. What this means for the future is unknown at this time, but it should not go unnoticed that Golden Gate University has been a part of the fabric of San Francisco for well over 100 years, and that's who we are. Thanks for your time, and I'll take any questions that you might have.
Great. We may have some. We're going to open it up first to public comment.
Sure.
And then we'll see if we have questions. Any public comment on this item? Ms. Hester?
Golden Gate University Law School, class of 1976. Sue Hester. When I went to law school, and I went as a daytime student, full-time law student, most of the students had housing in San Francisco. I went to law school when I was 29 because when I went to college, women didn't get into law school. That was the 60s. But by 73, women became a majority of my class. It was stunning. It's the first time there was a majority of women in a law school ever. And one of the things I learned was there were two people within a block of me that already had housing that were also in my class. One was a former professor at SF State, and the other one was a former worker in the city. So there was various people in my class that had housing. I knew a couple people who didn't have housing, and they got housing in San Francisco because in the 70s, housing was actually obtainable, unlike 2017. I really support Golden Gate University struggling with this. It's heartening to see universities, nonprofit universities, and state schools struggling with student housing. And it's Hastings, it's UCSF, the medical school. Those are state schools, as well as the Art Institute, Golden Gate, USF. USF has a lot of dormitories on their campus currently, but they're building ever more because they have an enrollment cap that was imposed by the Board of Supervisors 5-10 years ago, and they're facing up to their need to build housing. There's a difference when you have a lot of undergraduates and when you have, like Golden Gate or the law schools, a lot of graduate students. I hope the Golden Gate stays at their location because my experience was people walk down from their offices to the Golden Gate in the nighttime. But I would urge this board to, when they're having a hearing on 333 12th Street, to also have a hearing on what is going on with provision of housing in San Francisco by all institutions. That would be a very productive hearing for this board to hear because it's a housing issue and we don't want to lose schools because they can't afford to have students live in this city. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ms. Hester. Any additional public comment? Seeing none, Commissioner Moore.
I'd like to bring to our attention the exceptional clarity of this particular document, clear disclosure on student composition, clear disclosure on teaching personnel and support, precise student housing forecast, et cetera, et cetera. And I would like to ask the department, as we are continuing to push for developing metrics for what an institutional master plan has to do, to look at the outline of this particular document on page 3 and use that as a minimum guideline of what we're expecting from others, starting with an executive summary, nature of the institution, including mission and institutional goals, physical plant, access traffic and traffic circulation patterns, near-term development plans, including impact on San Francisco general plan priority policies. There couldn't be anything more to the point and more obviously pointing to where others are lacking. And so I strongly urge the department, and I want to bring this to the attention of all supervisors, that this is the type of disclosure we need in an ever more complex environment with competing interests about housing, et cetera, walkability, transportation, congestion, and. This is the way to do it, and I ask that all institutions, large or small, be ultimately asked to follow this outline. And my strong support and compliments to those who prepared the outline in the institution who stands behind this thorough work.
Thank you. No other comments? We will close this hearing then, and thank you. Yeah, I appreciate the document was very clear, and that's kind of what we're looking for in an IMP, so we appreciate it. Great. Thank you, Mr. Perry.
Commissioners, it'll place this on item 10 for case number 2017-008461 CUA at 2358 Fillmore Street. This is a conditional use authorization.
Good afternoon, Commissioners. David Weissglass, Planning Department staff. The case before you is a request for conditional use authorization to allow the establishment of a liquor store doing business as Verve Wine in the Upper Fillmore Neighborhood Commercial Zoning District and a 40X Height and Bulk District. The tenant space, Verve Wine plans to operate with a Type 21 ABC license, and those conditions are available for you in the staff report. And they soon plan to apply for a Type 86 license, allowing on-site instructional tastings in the space. The tenant space measures approximately 810 square feet and was previously occupied by a shoe store doing business as Gimme Shoes. And the space is located in a two-story commercial building with the only other ground floor tenant space being occupied by a women's clothing store doing business as Curve, and there are offices above. This is the second location of Verve Wines, the first being in New York City. This case was originally scheduled for October 19th, 2017 hearing and was continued to today's hearing. To date, the department has received no public correspondence regarding the proposal. The department recommends approval of the draft motion with conditions. This concludes my presentation. I'm available for any questions you may have. Thank you.
Thank you. Project sponsor? Welcome. You have 5 minutes.
Good afternoon. My name is Dustin Wilson. I am one of the partners at Verve Wine. Just a little background on myself. I come from a long stint as a sommelier in various restaurants around the country. Some nicer restaurants in both here in San Francisco, New York, as well as in Colorado. Verve Wine, we started about a little over a year ago, and our first location, as he mentioned, is in New York City, in the neighborhood of Tribeca. We claim to be a high quality retail store. We service not only the Tribeca neighborhood where we're located, but also the majority of Manhattan and sometimes beyond. We are very much looking forward to joining the community in the neighborhood of Lower Pack Heights and providing a great value to that community through a beautiful storefront, which I believe you may have seen some of the renditions, a well-curated list of very high-quality wines, not just expensive wines, but across all price ranges, wine education, as we've mentioned, as well as providing a high level of genuine and warm hospitality to our customers in the neighborhood, which stems from my personal experience from being in restaurants for a very long time. We feel that we bring a very unique perspective, not only on wine, but also the retail experience in wine, just given our backgrounds in the restaurant industry, as well as our network within the wine industry from our combined decades of years of experience. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Wilson. So we'll open this item up for public comment. That was you that spoke, and Richard Warren, too. I have a comment. You're also with the project sponsor. Okay. Any additional public comment on this item? Seeing none, public comment is closed. Commissioners? Commissioner Richards.
I guess since I'm the one up here that likes wine the most, I read with great interest this packet. I think it's an interesting concept. A logarithm seem to run the world, and I can't wait to see what you pair me with. I move to approve.
Second.
Thank you, Commissioners. On that motion to approve this matter with conditions, Commissioner Fong?
Aye.
Commissioner Koppel?
Aye.
Commissioner Melgar?
Aye.
Commissioner Moore?
Aye.
Commissioner Richards?
Aye.
And Commission President Hillis?
Aye.
So moved, Commissioners. That motion passes unanimously, 6-0. Commissioners, that'll place us on item 11 for case number 2017-005533 CUA at 4068 18th Street. This is a conditional use authorization.
Good afternoon, Commissioners. Kathleen Campbell, Planning Department staff. The item before you is a request for conditional use authorizing accessory brewery activities, ABC License 75, Brew Pub, within an existing full-service restaurant doing business as Lark at 4068 18th Street, located within the Castro Street Neighborhood Commercial District. The project would allow the applicant to seek a Type 75 license from the California Department of Alcohol Beverages. The license would permit the sale of beer, wine, and distilled spirits on-site consumption in association with the restaurant, plus the operation of a brewery, microbrewery. The existing tenant space measures approximately 1,500 square feet, and the size would not change as part of the project. Minor tenant improvements are associated with the brew station. Since publication of the case report, the department has received 4 letters of support from the public and a petition of support with 43 signatures. I have copies of the subject letters which are available upon request. The department is in support of the project and recommends approval with conditions. This concludes my presentation. I'm available for questions.
Thank you. Project sponsor. Welcome.
Thank you, Commissioners. My name is Luis Uribe, and I'm a consultant for the food and beverage industry in the state of California. Today, we are requesting a conditional use permit to operate a brew pub at an already existing restaurant. This brew pub was specially designed for restaurants. There is no brewing to be taking place. There is no storage. There is no smells of any kind. And the most important thing is that the upgrade from the 41 type of license to the 75, it won't alter the operation that we have at the restaurant. The restaurant will remain exactly the same, with the exceptions that we are going to offer our customers, yes, the choice of a cocktail before or after dinner. It's not going to be a bar, definitely not, since we are going to be closing the kitchen as soon as we close the bar. I'll be available for any questions. I'd be more than glad to.
Great, thank you. We'll open it up first to public comment. Any public comment on this item? Seeing none, we'll close public comment. Commissioner Richards.
I think this is a great idea. I've been to the Lark restaurant. I think it's been a good neighbor to the Castro. I think there's another kind of brew pub further down the street that I understand this commission was approved probably years ago. I think this would add to the offerings of the restaurant, and it would create more vibrancy for you. And I absolutely wholly support it and move to approve.
Second.
Thank you, Commissioners. On that motion to approve this matter with conditions, Commissioner Fong?
Aye.
Commissioner Koppel?
Aye.
Commissioner Melgar?
Aye.
Commissioner Moore?
Aye.
Commissioner Richards?
Aye.
And Commission President Hillis?
Aye.
So moved, Commissioners. That motion passes unanimously, 6-0. Commissioners, that'll place us under your discretionary review calendar for item 12 for case number 2015-018225 DRP at 171 Judson Avenue. This is a discretionary review.
Good afternoon, Planning Commission, Delvin Washington, Southwest Team Leader. Subject property, again, is located at 171 Judson Avenue. The property is on the south side of Judson between Edna and Circular Avenue and is in an RH1 district. Two-story rear addition was originally constructed without the benefit of a building permit, and it appears to have been constructed back in the 1970s by a previous owner of the property, and is currently being modified and legalized with this permit. The proposal includes the renovation and addition to this existing two-story single-family residence. This work will also include the construction of a rear horizontal addition on the first and second levels, along with a third-story vertical addition. And the proposed rear addition will have a depth of about 17 feet 7 inches and a width of 20 feet. The redesign will include a 5-foot side setback along the east side property line and a 35-foot rear setback. A new roof deck will be included on both the front and rear of the building with cable railings. The overall proposal is a relatively modest alteration and is consistent with similar residential expansions for this type of structure. The DR filer's residence is more than 65 feet from the property's rear property line. The primary objection is the proposed third floor, whereas third floors have been consistently allowed throughout San Francisco on single-family residences in similar zone districts. The project meets all the applicable requirements of the planning code and design guidelines. The planning department is in support of the project and has determined that this addition is neither exceptional nor extraordinary and is recommending that the Planning Commission not take discretionary review and approve the project. That concludes my presentation.
All right, DR requester, Mr. Cutler. Welcome, you have 5 minutes.
Good afternoon. My name is Brian. I'm the homeowner and resident of the property directly to the south side of the project site. I'm concerned with the addition of the third story with front and rear decks. This additional story will sit high above the surrounding homes and on my block and noticeably stick out. My block in the immediate neighborhood has a very uniform visual character made up mostly of two-story, flat-roof single-family homes. As the project site is surrounded by this style, it will completely break this pattern and look very much out of place. I'm fairly new to the neighborhood, and a major factor of my decision to own a home here was that the area was so well laid out and there was no odd construction or visually disrupting features. It's a warm community full of families and modest home sizes. If this project adds the proposed third-story plans, it will drastically change this and negatively affect the property values of my home and my neighbors. I can attest that if this project was completed a little over a year ago when I was home shopping, I would think twice about the purchase and the amount I was willing to spend. I'm asking that the proposed project be changed to remove the third-story plans. This still allows for a large expansion to a 5-bedroom house that is more in line with the other single-family homes on my block. I just have a few pictures to demonstrate the neighborhood. And the neighboring.
If you can speak into the microphone.
I'm sorry. The top picture shows the surrounding houses and highlights the project site. As you can see, it's a very uniform, regular pattern. And the lower picture is the rear of the home, which also shows a very regular pattern. Just a couple more pictures of the surrounding neighborhood that demonstrates the same visual character. This is Marston Avenue Street, which is south of the project site. That's all I have. Thank you for your time.
Great, thank you. Any public comment in support of the DR?
I'm sorry, I do have one letter from a neighbor that I'd like to submit.
Okay, you can submit it.
Okay.
Yeah. Seeing no additional public comment, or are you commenting on in support of the DR? Yeah.
My name is Alfredo Vergara Lobo, and I live at 62 Marston Avenue, right next to Brian's home. I've lived there for 25 years, and this project is proposed for the lot, basically kitty corner to mine. And like Brian said, this project will eliminate any privacy I have in my backyard. I have 2 young children who enjoy the little bit of privacy that we have. The viewing line from that 3rd floor is going to eliminate that. Also, I think that approving a project like this will go against the character of my neighborhood. That neighborhood, as you saw in the pictures, is pretty much flat between 2 and 1 floor structures. A 3rd would be out of character. Thank you.
Thank you. Any additional public comment in support of the DR? Seeing none, project sponsor. You have 5 minutes.
Hello, Commissioners. My name is Suhail Shatara. I'm the architect on the project. This is Mrs. Mooney, and she's the owner. First of all, we have about 26 signatures of support from local neighbors around the property. I just want to begin with a few images of the building. So this is...
Speak in the microphone.
Yes, speak into the mic, please.
I'm sorry. This is the building at the front. This is the existing building at the rear. This is what was there 30 in the 70s, I believe. This is the back of their rear yard, which is the southern neighbor is beyond the telephone pole that you see, or the electric pole you see back there. This is the neighbor's building, the white building at the rear. And the separation between the rear building and the existing illegal addition that was built in the 70s is over 100 feet. It's about 100 feet and 8 inches. This is sort of a rendering showing the existing conditions, relationship to the neighbor. And this is the addition on top in relationship to the adjacent neighbor. Part of the parapet at the front will hide the glass guardrail at the front. This is just a side view relationship. This is the building with the addition on this side and the neighbor's building on the other side.
You can pull that mic over if it helps you.
I'm sorry.
Yeah.
This is a cross-section of the conditions. So what we're also proposing is when we did a little outreach with the neighbors asked us to come and meet with them. We said, okay, we will create a parapet wall and set back the actual deck away from the property line and away from the back wall. And at the same time, we set it back 5 feet. So our actual distance to the guardrail is more like 105 feet 8 inches. And then to the building, it's roughly another 10 feet plus beyond that. So we're almost 115 feet away. Let's see. So I guess what we're saying is we feel that the family needs more space. The amount of bedrooms is a little zealous. That wasn't my intention with them initially, but they wanted more bedrooms. So I spoke to them recently, and we looked at potentially cutting down the bedrooms so that at the ground level this becomes a bedroom, the entire back becomes the family room. And then on the second level, we turned the back bedroom into one bedroom because the bedrooms are very small. So, and at the top floor, we have 2 bedrooms with the family room at the top. So we're looking at 4 bedrooms total. This is the view outside the back window with the parapet wall, and then you can see the guardrail in the foreground to the neighbor's house in the background. So I guess Mrs. Mooney would like to say something about the property as well.
Hi, I'm Shore Moini, and we've been living in this neighborhood over 40 years. And our need right now is so much, it's more space because we have 2 children right now that they're growing and they need more space. I have an elderly mother-in-law living with us, and we constantly have family members coming over to take care of her because we work and we need their help. And that was one of the reasons that we needed that. We wanted to have different levels because of the children are getting older and they need their own space right now. And because of the elderly person, in the main floor, it's been really hard on them. And we've we're a very traditional family. We all live together, and our kids, they stay with us until they're married and out of the house later. And that's the reason we wanted a new addition to our house.
Any questions by anybody?
Well, we may, but let's finish this process first.
So, the overall square footage, just real quickly.
So that's your time. You'll have a 2-minute rebuttal.
Okay,
though.
that's fine.
All right, let's just open it up for public comment in support of the project and opposed to the DR, if there's any. Seeing none, DR requester, you have a 2-minute rebuttal. If you have anything additional you'd like to say in response to the presentation.
Just want to say that I like my neighbors. I have nothing against them. They're nice people. I even like the architect that they've hired. This is not about anything other than the privacy the little bit of privacy that we enjoy and the character of the neighborhood. And, there was a time a few years ago when I considered doing a project like this. And one of the reasons why I gave it up, as much as I need the space, I have large family too. I have people coming all the time. Our neighborhood is not Manhattan. It's not for big buildings. And this is why we moved there. So, again, I don't oppose their motives. I just oppose the project.
Thank you. Project sponsor, you have a 2-minute rebuttal.
Yes, I was going to talk about the square footage. The square footage is basically 2,900 plus for the actual habitable space, and then the garage is over 400 square feet. So it's getting up there, but yet the horizontal addition that's talked about is really at the same location where the existing horizontal addition that was built in the 70s is at. So we're not expanding the building envelope at second level anymore. Then at the third level, we're actually bringing back the building, enough to at least provide a little bit of a deck at the rear where there is a little bit of a view, but it also provides for some light and air and ventilation, that people can step out there. Our intention is not to invade our neighbors' privacy here. We elected to put planters and give them a little bit of screening. But that's always something that could go away. So we're doing our best to try to work with them, and that's what we have. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. So we'll close this portion of the hearing and open up for commissioner comments and questions if there's any. Commissioner Moore?
I think this project poses some interesting challenges. The most important one is the one Mr. Washington mentioned, that densification in this neighborhood is probably unavoidable. Then the question is, how do you do it? And how do you do it sensitively and in anticipation that other people could do the same, which means setting a precedent. And I think the precedent is to be more than sensitive to your neighbors. And I believe that extruding the third floor right over the footprint of this second floor is too aggressive given the overall shaping of the neighborhood. So if I would be looking at this project, there are two red flags. One, we're legalizing something which was constructed without permit at a time when apparently it was a notice that this wasn't following the rules. The second one is that the arrangement of the floor plans raises a number of questions. There are hardly any floor plans by which you have a building with 2 family rooms basically clustered around by 7 bedrooms. This room looks more like a rooming house. And I'm speaking here in simply organizational terms, not reflecting on family traditions, et cetera, because that is in this discussion important to know, but not deciding how we look at the project. What I'm concerned about is that indeed the lower floor should have been brought forward as an ADU, because what happens if we approve that project as it is, and somebody just simply adds a kitchen and has an ADU? That would have been the proper way of enlarging this home, except ADUs and the process for that are slightly different. Not totally different, but a little different. The second point I'd like to make is that by tucking in, for example, the third floor on both sides, one could have come up with a model of how to densify this neighborhood without being so oppressive to other neighbors. There's a certain style, there's a certain consistency in which this neighborhood lays itself out. And in order to be respectful to that, I would have tucked in the building from both sides, and it would still leave sufficient room and square footage for all rooms to occur. But I would have also basically I would not be considering a terrace to the street side of the building, because that is totally atypical and further accentuates the bulkiness and massing of this building. So those are 2 points I'd like to have the Commission look at. One is to be a better example for leading a proper densification of the neighborhood, tuck the building in from both sides on the third floor, and remove the deck on the street side of the building. Those would be my comments, and curious what other commissioners are thinking.
Commissioner Kopp.
Thank you, Mr. President. I don't have a problem with the project as proposed. This to me looks like a project would look after we kind of put our 2 cents in and made some edits and clarifications. I do think both of the decks that are set back aren't necessarily going to attract an Airbnb party crowd, which is something we often look at. I'm still open to hearing what the other commissioners say, and I'm open to other ideas, but was also, as was Commissioner Moore, kind of tossing around the idea of, is an ADU possible here, just to provide a different or an additional unit of some sort.
Commissioner Melgar.
Yes, thank you. I agree with the points that Commissioner Moore made, although my objection would be to the deck in the back, not necessarily the front, because I think that the neighbors raise the issue of privacy. So it's, to me, more important than the aesthetics. But also, I'm really wary of setting a precedent that will have Sunnyside be Noe Valley in 15 years. And so where we do want to densify, I think, this particular neighborhood, I do think that we should be adding units. I like the ADU point, and I would, say that to the staff.
Commissioner Moore.
I also would suggest to lower the floor height by 1 foot, because we do not need that much floor height on the upper parts there. That's one possibility to diminish the massing.
Commissioner Melgar.
So I was curious also about the parking, because we're keeping the garage, right? We're keeping the garage, even though we have a full driveway. Did you at any time think about incorporating the garage, or is that allowed in this neighborhood?
I think the intent was to keep the garage as a one-car garage, not expand that or not reduce it for bicycle parking. Mm-hmm. I think we're open to the concept of lowering the height of the building. I think the way they're using the home now, I think they'd rather not have an accessory dwelling unit, but they can entertain the accessory dwelling unit maybe in the future. If it's part of the conditions of getting this approved, I think we can entertain that. And then I guess they'll lease it out at the point when they don't need it anymore. Right now, the mother is living in the house with them, and they would like to give her a little sense of privacy. So it could be an accessory dwelling unit where the mother will live there. So this is my thoughts at the moment.
So just to chime in, I think it's there isn't much that rises to kind of the extraordinary here. So things I think I would support, although, I think that the unit's it's almost being built as an accessory dwelling unit. It's got access from the front and from the garage. So I'm not sure what us stipulating that it is or is not would do. Somebody in the future can convert it to that. I think it's being built to allow for that, which is good. I don't particularly like the front balcony more so than the back, just because I think they tend to be more visible from the street level, and that's a totally kind of different concept than what's around. I'm not as troubled by the third floor. The height, I think pushing it back a little bit from the kind of the typical property line there could be neighborly. It's 10 feet, so I'm not as troubled by the height. I think interior spaces at 9 feet tend to be small and feel cramped, and I don't think it gets much to the neighbors. So I know we've all thrown around a couple of things. I'm kind of supportive of a front deck removal, maybe shifting it back a couple feet on that back property line. Commissioner Moore.
I would support the front deck to be removed, particularly Commissioner Melgar, you may not have noticed it, but that is a north-facing deck. The south-facing deck with a rather deep rear yard, I think, is the appropriate one, particularly it's going to be used of 2 bedrooms. That would probably be a better idea. In addition to the fact that it's very atypical for this part of town to have decks facing the street. It's interesting to hear both Commissioner Hillis and Richards talking about it could be an ADU. I'm looking towards Mr. Washington. We would be well advised to ask the project applicant to apply for an ADU, because you cannot install an ADU unless you properly permit it, and this would be an easier way to get it permitted under current legislation. Is that correct?
That's correct. And again, that's up to the project sponsors. I mean, they obviously have a situation where there's potentially multi-generation sharing one household. So a lot of times they may not necessarily be at that point in their lives where they want to entertain the options of an ADU, but it sounds like they've got an elderly parent that they are sharing their household with, and obviously growing children that are probably reaching into young adulthood that also may be sharing the household. And it's not uncommon today that you have living situations and arrangements like that.
So having the legality of a kitchen right in part of the current construction, irrespective of extended family members or so live there, is still a legal requirement. You cannot build a kitchen because your parents live there and not have a fully permitted ADU on this one. So it would be in the interest of the applicant for the extended family situation to have an ADU and amend the plans accordingly. But that would require a separate application, correct? That would mean taking this.
Could we condition our approval on the application of that unit being an ADU?
I don't think you have that option at this point to amend it to require the ADU.
Application.
Right.
No, but we could amend it. So to the project sponsor, are you willing to apply for, condition this on the requirement that bottom unit be configured as a separate unit and you request approval for an ADU?
I am, and I need to convince my client of doing the same. So it's really up to my client. I think if they understand what the ADU is really all about and how their mother can actually use it to her benefit, I think they would agree with me on this issue. So I shouldn't be speaking out of turn. I did ask the owners about it. Mr. Monani is a little hesitant because he doesn't want to get trapped into that. But I think the way they're using it is exactly like an ADU. I don't see a problem. I don't have a problem with you conditioning it that way, and then we can apply later with some commitment from the owners.
Right, because I think Commissioner Moore's point is you couldn't, under the current rules, build this space and then convert it to an ADU because it would be then existing living space.
Correct. So
you'd have
if
to
you
do
get
it
a
now.
commitment from me, you need to trust me enough.
Well,
to
we can
move
condition
forward.
the permit on it, adding a kitchen and applying for an ADU.
Excuse me, the commission could also just continue the item if they want to give some time for the project sponsor to consider the option of an ADU or not, and then they can come back. We could continue to a specific date.
I mean, I'd be happy conditioning and moving it forward so they can get on with their projects, but Commissioner Richards?
So, I mean, I agree that this is precedent setting, and I think what Commissioner Melgar said, this could be Noe Valley in 15 years. We're seeing this all over the city. Giving your client some time to actually mull it over, because I think putting an ADU in is densification, quote, done right. A week, you know, I mean, we're not talking delaying this thing a long time, but have that conversation, make it appropriate, and come back and let us know where your thinking, where client's thinking is.
I think that's fine with me. 2 weeks is what you're thinking, Delvin?
Yeah, we need a lot. December 21st isn't going to work, so it'd have to go into the early January. I mean, because you need plans, you know. So I think we can go to the first meeting in January. Is that possible, Jonas? I mean, it doesn't seem like it would be controversial.
So I move to continue the first week of January.
January 11th.
Yep. Commissioner Moore?
I would also ask, you described rearranging of bedrooms, fewer bedrooms,
I'll
to
be
create a
doing-
slightly more convincible plan. We'd appreciate seeing those changes, not just described in words, but really, we'd like to see what it really is you're proposing.
Yeah, I'm already there. I would modify the plan to show it as a more plausible plan. I would consider, though, the front deck maybe being reduced to about 7 feet if possible, instead of its full 12 to 15 feet, or even 5 feet, just so that they have a place to step out to.
And also, just regarding that front deck, I do want to remind the commission, this structure has about a 14-foot front setback from the rear of from the front property line. So it's surprisingly, it's dramatically set back, atypical from San Francisco, which usually has, you know, zero front setback in many parcels. This one actually has a setback that's pretty substantial to begin with. The actual structure is an additional, the top floor is an additional 14 feet. So the deck will be visible, but it will really be somewhat de minimis from just visual at this front sidewalk.
Yeah, and I would still support removing the deck. It's just, I mean, I know we're looking at this globally to decks and how they're viewed, but and I know people have these spaces and they just, front decks seem to be a thing you put on there when you have that space, but it definitely kind of interferes with the, you know, it's visual clutter in the front of these buildings throughout the city.
I see your point.
Commissioner Melgar?
You already said it. Thank you.
Commissioner Moore?
Visual clutter, I'd like to take that a little bit further. Since the deck asymmetrically actually sits also on the western property line, it is not held back from both sides equally. It makes it even more cluttered. So you have a third floor sticking out with one of the balconies sitting right on the property line. I would support Commissioner Hillis's idea of removing the front deck altogether.
All right, and I'll second the motion, because I don't think I got a second yet.
Thank you. Commissioners, there's a motion that has been seconded to continue this matter to January 11th with direction from the commission to install an ADU and removal of that front deck. On that motion, Commissioner Fong?
Aye.
Commissioner Koppel?
Aye.
Commissioner Melgar?
Aye.
Commissioner Moore?
Aye.
Commissioner Richards?
Aye.
And Commission President Hillis?
Aye.
So moved, Commissioners. That motion passes unanimously 6-0. Commissioners, that'll place us on item 13 for
Thank you,
case number
Commissioners.
2016-012108 DRP at 583 47th Avenue. This is a discretionary review.
Good afternoon, Commissioners. Chris May, Planning Department staff. You have before you a request for discretionary review of a building permit to construct a one-story, 425 square foot third floor vertical addition above the existing two-story single-family dwelling, as well as a roof deck above the proposed new third floor and front and rear roof decks above the existing second floor at 583 47th Avenue in the Richmond District. The property is zoned RH1, is within the 40X height and bulk district, and is not seeking any exceptions or variances from the planning code. The DR application raised four main concerns with the proposed project. First, the DR opposed the proposed fourth floor roof deck, calling it out of character and an assault on privacy. Second, the DR opposed the diagonal orientation of the rear wall of the vertical addition, recommending that it be squared off so that it faces towards the rear of the property and not obliquely across neighboring properties. The DR also noted that the 311 plans didn't accurately reflect the true slope of the street, which had the effect of understating the visual impact of the vertical addition on the block. Finally, the DR objected to the massing of the third floor vertical addition as it could be seen from the public right-of-way. The department reviewed the project per the residential design guidelines, the planning code, and the general plan, and the project was reviewed by the residential design advisory team 3 times, including 2 reviews after the DR was filed. The department does not object to the angled rear wall and windows, finding them consistent with the residential design guidelines. The department requested that the project sponsor revise the front elevations and renderings to more accurately depict the steeper gradient along 47th Avenue. As a result, the department consulted RDAT, and it was agreed that the massing of the proposed third floor vertical addition appeared to be more visible and disruptive to the pattern of massing along this portion of the block. Staff recommended to the project sponsor several means of minimizing the bulkiness of the third floor so that it is less visible from the street. The department also recommended that the uppermost roof deck above the third floor vertical addition be eliminated from the project. The project sponsor has not made any modifications to address these issues. Commissioners, since the publication of the staff report, the Planning Department has received one additional letter from a neighbor across the street from the subject property, which supports RDAT's recommendations, and I have that a copy right here for the record. The department recommends that the commission take discretionary review and approve the proposed project with the modifications as specified by the Residential Design Advisory Team. These include removing the uppermost roof deck above the proposed third floor vertical addition and lowering the ceiling height or sloping the third floor roof such that it is less visible from the street. This concludes my presentation, and I am available for further questions. Thank you.
Thank you. DR requester. You can do the overhead, yep. Just pull that mic towards you so we can hear you also.
I'll be up there, and I just want to make sure.
Oh, okay.
And is that, thank you very much, Chris. We agree with you, and we aren't asking for any more than what you and the RDAT have already requested. 13 households in the immediate neighborhood are party to the DR. Many other neighbors are concerned about this project and the precedent it sets for the neighborhood. I'm here as we can't all speak. My name is Barrett Peterson. My husband and I live here, downhill from the property that we're talking about today. Our house is the same footprint as 583 and is on the same 70-foot lot. I became involved with this project back in May when at least 15 other concerned neighbors and I met with Bonnie Dick and Jeff Burris, the architect. At that meeting, we all agreed that due to the number of people involved, John Anzer and I would be the key points of contact. I'm also active in neighborhood groups and a member of PAR. At this point, the project plans have been reviewed by the RDAT 3 times. The recommendations are remove the floor deck and minimize the third floor vertical addition. A bit about our neighborhood. 583 is on the most beautiful architectural cohesive block in the Richmond. In previous discussions, SF Planning has described the block as very cohesive in design, material, and massing, and you can see that out in the photo here. We live in an area frequented by tourists and locals alike due to its immediate proximity to some of the most beautiful open spaces in the city: Suter Heights Park, Land's End, Ocean Beach, Golden Gate Park. Of the 54 homes on the block, 38 are designed by the same architect, built by the same builder, based on the same layout, with the same slight variations on the facade. These 38 homes are designed to maximize light, which is very important in the outer Richmond, and we love and depend on our center patios and multiple skylights in the back of the house for much needed light. The most recent RDAT decision said that the massing of the proposed third floor vertical addition, including the roof deck above, is inconsistent with the existing neighborhood character. More specifically, when comparing the plans to the RDAT review checklist, with regard to the does the building topography respect the site and surrounding areas? No. Is the height and depth compatible? No. Is the form compatible? No. Is the facade width compatible? No. Proportions compatible? No. Roof line compatible? No. RDAT found that the removal of the roof deck, as well as either lowering or sloping the third floor, would meet the general intent of the residential design guidelines. We completely agree, and that's all we're asking for today. But beyond massing issues, I also want to address some privacy issues that we're quite concerned about that add to our concern for the project. Our houses are very close together at the end of the block. It's on a 70-foot lot, and it's uphill so that from 583 you can see down into many neighboring homes. If you can see on the picture, It's very dense here. We have used vegetation to provide some sort of privacy at this end, but when you go up to the third floor, you can see this is a view that was provided in your docket by the property owners, how much privacy is impacted. The bottom level and our backyards become much more visible, and I don't even know what it's going to look like from the fourth floor, especially when you're talking about areas like our center patios. So we're very concerned about our privacy. We're with the RDAT and SF planning. A number of neighbors have added additional space while respecting the character of the neighborhood and the privacy of our neighbors. We know it's possible. Please respect the RDAT decision. They've met 3 times on this and eliminate the 4th floor deck and reduce the 3rd floor massing. Thank you.
Great, thank you. We'll open it up for public comment in support of the DR and opposed to the project, if there's any.
We've got, yes, we've got a couple back here.
All right, come on forward. And if there's others who'd like to speak, you can line up on the screen side of the room here.
I never did take my Toastmasters courses, so I'll try to make this quick, and it's going to be a little robotic. My name is Eric Peterson, and I'm here today to add my voice to the community support for both RDAT decisions of July 12th and October 16th of 2017. 13 households in the immediate vicinity surrounding the project have signed the DR, and more households like ours are very concerned about this. I know a number of neighbors have sent their support of the DR because they couldn't attend this meeting. We hope you will support the RDAT recommendations as well to ensure that this extensive and expensive review process remains relevant. Please require the project sponsor to enact the recommendations RDAT has repeatedly requested. The previous RDAT recommendations are specifically, again, this has already been covered, remove the roof deck and to reduce the 3rd floor height to 8 feet. So my wife and I live at 5532 Anza Street, around the corner from the project site, and we just moved in last year, but we've been a resident for many years in the Outer Richmond. Recently, we moved into our Sutro Heights dream house, where we're close to friends and family. And when we bid for our house, we were one of 24 bids, and we were accepted, even though we were well below the highest bid, because the previous owners were aware of our appreciation for the character of our house and for the neighborhood. So this attitude of respect is typical of my neighbors. They're active, engaged, and interested in ensuring that as others improve their property, they do so with respect for their neighbors. We're not against change. We're constructive. We're not conservative. This is a block that bands together, for example, such as petitioning the city to assess the block so utilities could be placed underground. There's a lot of great cooperation among the neighbors on a daily level. The open and cohesive character of this neighborhood is now gone or disappearing from many parts of the city. These are a few of the characteristics that ensure that tourists and SF residents get to enjoy this signature block that's adjacent to Sutro Heights Park. Too often, a builder's temporary gain comes at the neighborhood's expense and becomes a precedent for further abuse. As the city's gotten more congested, I'm sure as you've probably heard before, we're seeing more and more people, including real estate speculators, who, after they've been priced out of other markets, attempt to convert the existing housing stock beyond the neighborhood character. The owners of 583 have already placed added space on the bottom floor. They'll have a new living area on the 3rd floor, and we'll have a second deck with a view of the ocean, which I don't have, for instance. Please support the RDAT process in ensuring that all neighbors update and expand their property with regard to the RDAT, the city's residential design guidelines, and the neighborhood character with respect to their neighborhood's privacy. So once again, we're just asking that the roof deck is removed and that the 3rd floor height is kept to 8 feet. Thank you.
Thank you. Any additional comment? Go ahead.
Good afternoon. My name is Chiang Yang. For 41 years, my mother, Patricia Yang, has lived next door to 583. And about 7 years ago, my husband and I moved into this family home also. My husband, Jeff, can't be here today as he suffers from Parkinson's and is coping with medical issues and is at home with 24-hour home care. When we received the packet from the city with the 3D renderings of what the 3rd floor and 4th floor decks additions would look like, we had misgivings about the project. we had seen the two-dimensional plans, but looking at the 3D plans, it gives us a clearer idea of the potential impact on these additions on the neighborhood. Now, at the May 17th meeting with Dick and Bonnie Rades, the architect Jeff Burris, and many of our Sutro Heights neighbors who had similar concerns, I'd hoped that we would be able to come to a quick and reasonable solution. At that meeting, I shared my concerns, including how the 3D renderings, which helped us interpret the additions, they still didn't quite represent the slope of the street and the line of the roofs. The perspective was a little bit off. And I showed a graphic based on a photo I'd taken from the spot where it seemed the renderings were taken from, that particular viewpoint. And it just didn't quite measure up. Now, in drawings, I mean, they're created using software, and you can change things and, change the angles, rotate, and so on. It's so easy to fix and change. But however, a building, and this is so important to me, is that once a building is up, it's up. We can't change it. So, and that's why we are here. We want to make sure that the appropriate building is put up in our neighborhood. My husband, Jeff, also expressed a different concern at that meeting. He mentioned how hard it had been on his physical and mental health because of a loud construction, which was was pretty much right next to his bedroom, and went on for over a year and a half. So he wanted at that point to know what Dick and Bonnie could do to ensure that the next round of construction wouldn't be as lengthy or disruptive. So our family hopes that the next construction phase can be completed at a faster pace. If any rules or that address reasonable construction timeframes, please do consider that for us. As for myself, I work full-time and have to mind my elderly mother and my husband, who often has medical complications. So I really don't need the additional stress of having to deal with construction issues next door. So in conclusion, I simply, our family, would want the project sponsors to accept the RDAT staff recommendations as is.
Thank you, sir.
And less visibility. Thank you.
Thank you. Any additional comment?
Hi, Commissioner. My name is John Anzer, and I live on 47th Avenue, 3 houses from the project. I'm here today to speak to the issue of the visibility of the 3rd floor addition from 47th Avenue and our community's desire to retain the existing cohesive streetscape. Here's a picture of 47th. So here's a photo of 47th. The project is part of a larger integrated neighborhood. On 47th Avenue, it is one of 9 identical C.O. Clausen designed homes. They are all pristine from 1938. So here you can see them here. And then here's another view of them looking down. This pattern of home runs around the corner along Anza Street and then all the way up 48th Avenue. It has the effect of unifying the look of the neighborhood, and it feels almost like a planned community type design. The planning staff reviewed the neighborhood and it concluded, quote, it is very cohesive in design, material, and massing. So here's a photo of what the new project will look like. It is very visible from the street. The 3rd floor has no architectural integration with the rest of the house or the neighborhood. It clearly looks like and reads as an addition, so it must be made less visible from the street. The CEQA exemption for this project was based on this addition being, quote, minimally visible from the street. So under CEQA, we all need to assume this is an historical house, and the renderings produced by the sponsors clearly show this is not minimally visible. Many tourists visit this block because we are the last block adjacent to Sutro Heights Park and the Cliff House, and high up on a hill overlooking the ocean scenery. They stop in front of these houses and take pictures of the houses and the beautiful ocean, which you can see behind them. This is a page from a travel blog that shows the 9 houses and refers to these 9 pristine houses as the 9 painted ladies of Sutro Heights. This is a very special, obviously a reference to the other more famous painted ladies. This is a very special neighborhood. It's the last block right above the ocean. It's unusual in the Richmond in that it's almost entirely owner-occupied. The staff report is supported by PAR and by 18 immediate households that signed off and became parties to the DR. In addition, we submitted a petition on a close-by project where there were 64 neighbors who stated they do not believe roof decks are appropriate in this neighborhood. The project sponsor is not even doing what staff has requested. The planning staff's reviewed this twice, and in both times said remove the deck and 8 feet only on the 3rd floor. Thank you.
Thank you. Any additional public comment in support of the DR? Seeing none, project sponsor, you have 5 minutes.
Hi.
We can. Just pull that mic over.
My name is Jeff Burris. I'm the principal of Studio 12 Architecture, and I'm the architect for the project. I'd like to address a few of the issues and walk you through the process of how we got to this point. A little background, I met Dick and Bonnie through my wife when she was a journalist. She had met Dick, and they had bought this house to be closer to their family. And they also like the street just as the neighbors do and as I do. And both Dick and Bonnie consider the Pacific Ocean one of the San Francisco's most potent features, as do I. The house was originally built in 1939. It's a wood frame 2-story structure with 1,537 square feet of livable area, and the main floor is only 1,248 square feet with a little bit of extra room downstairs in the basement next to the garage. As is the case with many of these kind of structures, is the case with many of the structures, the building seismic and electrical systems were subpar and not to code. In addition, there were spatial issues where the garage was gigantic and the bedrooms were small, and we felt like there were some issues spatially and both code-wise to address for the project. Spatially, there were 2 issues. The rear of the yard is exceedingly short. We mentioned that it's a 70-foot lot, and it's a little dark back there because there's a large tree in the neighbor's yard. This is the block in question.
You know, that mic moves. You can move the mic over so you don't have to jump yourself.
Well, I'm reading from this side.
Okay, all right. Then just help us get to the mic.
So spatially, we were looking to address the rear yard, and then we felt like it was appropriate to add a 3rd story. And we do agree that the house sits on a pristine block, and we push that 3rd story 23.5 feet back from the front. The height allowance for this block is 40 feet, but the block features 3 and 2-story residential buildings. We would not be the only 3. We felt comfortable pursuing the 3rd floor addition. There are 7 houses on that section of 47th Ave that are actually 3 stories tall. Our design set the leading edge of the 3rd floor 23.6 back, as I said, and it's actually 26 feet 8 inches back from the front property line. This kept the addition well behind the hipped roof of the house. Front of the house, 23 feet 6 addition. We elected to make the new addition with a flat roof. This is consistent with the style of these architectural houses on this block. They have a hipped roof in the front and then a flat section in the back. My office considers new additions better served by their respectful differences from historic buildings. We never set out to copy what was done 80 years ago because we can't. But we can use other methods to marry the 2 eras, proportion, materials, and type of construction. In that regard, we did the following. We originally proposed an 8'9" ceiling height. We brought that down to 8'6". Although we made it 6 inches shorter than the height of the main floor, which is 9 feet. And where possible, we align the new addition with the existing systems, thereby giving the 3rd floor a natural extension to the floor below. We have a stairway that comes up, and we positioned this addition as far back as we could and still allow the stairway to come through. with a flat roof assembly and a majestic view of the city. Here, I wanted to show a diagram. So you understand, this is the sidewalk. There's the hipped roof. Here's the
Sir, can you
courtyard
speak into the mic?
that exists. Here's the roof deck profile, and the blue represents the addition profile. After completing the design work, we held a neighborhood pre-app review before submitting. At that meeting, we received verbal endorsements for the project from 3 neighbors, but no objections or questions were related at that meeting. We turned the project in for review to Chris May, and at that time, it was a little bit taller and a little bit bulkier. Chris felt the new addition was a little too visible from the street. This is actually a rendering of the building from across the street. After completing the design work, we held the review meeting, as I mentioned. And we worked hard to address this view. I know that the sponsors had mentioned that we had originally had an incorrect slope. It was actually 2% off. I've checked it since. Our rendering is overlaid onto a photo of the space itself. So to give you an idea of what the difference between 8 feet and 8'6" is.
Thank you, sir. Your
There it
time
is.
is up, but you do have a 2-minute rebuttal.
All right.
Thanks. Is there public comment in support of the project and opposed to the DR? Seeing none, we'll move to rebuttal. DR requester, you've got a 2-minute rebuttal, and then we'll come back to the project sponsor.
Hi, I'm going to keep this really short. We did have a meeting, and we had really hoped to come to resolution, and I think we've just got the 2 points that we're continuing to address that the San Francisco Planning Department has agreed upon, is to reduce the height, and that we have never said that 3 stories are an issue. We actually have had, I said earlier, there are a lot of people who have done it and done it with complete respect to the neighborhood and minimal visibility. This, however, is not a case. The SF Planning Department has come up with solutions that we are completely comfortable with, and we'd just like to move forward with those. As you saw from the pictures earlier, they're going to have a stunning view of the ocean in the back. This is a neighborhood, I will say, we are going to have, if roof decks start coming in, I anticipate deck wars, because we have a number of people that if one person builds up, the other person is going to build up, and we're really terrified of that precedent as well. So it isn't just for this house that we're talking about the roof deck, it's the neighborhood as a whole. You don't want to see people coming here time and time again talking about the same thing. We appreciate it.
Thank you. Project sponsor.
Good afternoon, Commissioners. Mark Loper, Ruben Junius, and Rose on behalf of the project sponsor. I think the DR requesters, planning staff, and the project sponsor are all in agreement on the major ideas here. And what we're talking about are basically 2 distinct issues, which is the height and the livability of this very small 425 square foot addition, and then what to do to make up for a substandard lot in the back. And we respectfully disagree with the DR requesters and think that the addition as proposed, both in terms of its height and the additional open space on top of the addition are appropriate and contextual. I have a handout for the commission, which is a comparison showing an 8-foot addition versus an 8'6" addition, just so everybody can see. And we have plenty of copies for anybody else who wants to look at it, just so everybody can see what that looks like in context. Just a few details about the roof deck. It's 198 square feet. That's very small. It's shaped so that it is stepping back from the back to address concerns about any issues with privacy and people looking into the rear courtyards. The proposed rear yard is less than 15 feet in width, and as you heard, it's dark and it slopes down. So providing and finding open space on the substandard lot is important. In terms of the 3rd floor family room, we were just talking about going from 10 feet to 9 feet, and here we're already at 8.5 feet. So we would submit that 8 feet is pretty tight. You may not be able to tell it, but one of the project sponsors, Dick, is 6'3", and both of his kids are over 6 feet. So with that, thank you, and we're available for any questions.
Thanks. So we'll close this portion of the hearing and open it up for commissioner comments and questions. Commissioner Moore.
Looking at the RADT's experience, which is quite comprehensive because they look at comparable projects with a large body of applications, I would have to agree with their findings. I think they are spot on. And what disturbs me is that the applicant has not taken that particular review serious. This commission is here to look at the thoroughness and accuracy of what the department does, and in the majority of cases we agree. Sometimes we push it a little bit further, which then occurs to the mutual consent was all involved. In this particular case, I find it amazing that the applicant did not take any of the thoughts that the department developed seriously. Nothing of what is asked for is reflected in the drawings, and I would have to say that I will strongly support the department's recommendation as their stand. So I'm curious what the rest of the commission is asking for. Otherwise, I would take DR and approve the project with the department's thoroughly vetted recommendations.
Commissioner Richards, would you want to second that?
Yes, I second.
Go ahead. Commissioner
Yeah, Commissioner Melgar seconded.
Okay. I read this report cover to cover because I found it incredibly interesting. We find ourselves sometimes siding against the RDAT when we take DR and we change projects. And then we find ourselves sometimes like this, maybe agreeing with some of the points that the RDAT had given the constraints of this substandard lot. I do think that there is the roof deck in the back and in the front is significant and usable. And I think it takes the project sponsor's need for open space to a point where they'd be satisfied. I don't think a sloping yard of 15 feet in the back is what I'd call usable open space, especially given that all the eyes are on you in the backyard. It's a bit, I think it's a bit constrained. 8 feet versus 8 feet 6 inches, I can't really discern what the difference is going to be. So, Commissioner Moore, if you can educate me on that, I support the motion without the second recommendation.
I believe that the 6-inch addition is significant and visible, and I think it accentuates seeing that there is indeed a building addition which doesn't even really tuck in properly. So I would stick with the staff's recommendation and not allow for the additional 6 inches.
Can I just ask staff?
You clearly see it when you look at the corner here of where it's most visible, and this is a static shot rather than when you see it in motion from different angles. It's that particular corner by which this building at 8 feet is far less visible. And I think that is extremely important. Whenever you break the roof line of an adjoining building, it becomes more visible, and you're kind of looking at it and want to try to figure out what's really going on here.
Can I ask staff a question on that? Because you made a recommendation on the height of the third floor, but I didn't see any. Was there a specific recommendation on that?
Yeah, well, the recommendation was to either slope it from one end to the other because it's more visible from one side compared to the other, or to drop it to 8 feet, the floor to ceiling height.
But if you sloped it, would you get? What were you proposing?
We were kind of leaving that up to the commissions to kind of make a ruling on, but
because I'm very much supportive of eliminating the roof deck, but I think, to me, the 6 inches, I don't think it does a lot for the neighborhood, but it does a lot for the livability of that third floor. I mean, I just don't like building new structures that have 8-foot tall ceilings. I just don't think they're great and livable. Kind of reminds me of my apartment in college, which was in a basement. So I think if we're building new, I just don't think that has an impact. So I'd be supportive of the elimination of the roof deck, but not necessarily of the 6 inches. Commissioner Koppel.
Thinking about it, maybe in a little more context, I think the difference is 8 foot. If you and I were to stand up and raise our hands, we would touch the ceiling, versus 8'6", we would not touch the ceiling. So I think that speaks volumes for what Commissioner Hillis mentioned as far as livability, and I would be completely supportive of eliminating the top roof deck and going with the 8'6".
Commissioner Richards.
So when I completely understand the view issue, Commissioner Moore. When we had the issue south of Market where they tried to add an extra floor in the 55-foot, get 6 floors in a 55-foot height limit, and et cetera, we railed against the fact of an 8-foot ceiling because that's where they saved the space and talked about livability issues. I agree. I mean, I have rooms down right now in where I live, and I think the ceiling is like 7.6 or 7.8, and it's cramped. So I still support the additional 6 inches.
Commissioner Moore.
Mr. Lindsay, could you comment on the sloped roof idea? What ceiling heights do we get? We get a higher ceiling height, except the building itself tapers back as it comes to the property line.
Well, I think we had in mind something that might be lower at one side and then up to. So you would have a little more, I think, volume
in the room.
Certainly on one half of the room, I think. So it might be lower than 8 feet on the one side and higher on the other. We didn't have anything specific, but it would be a way to address the issue.
Commissioner Richards.
So, Mr. Lindsay, you're saying maybe one end of the roof, the one that needs to be lower, would be like at the legal limit of 7 feet 6, and the other one could be at 10 feet? I mean,
Or 8 to 9.
Something like that, yeah. I think it could be done in a way that would make the massing apparently appear less from the street while still giving some volume inside. So I think it's a way to address it.
Commissioner Moore.
If you take this particular drawing as an example and you look over to the third building where there is a spring line at X feet and then you taper back from there, the room itself gets higher rather rapidly, but you are relieving the massing instead of coming down like a lid onto the property line. It just creates a slightly more graceful transition in the building style that this neighborhood is set up in. That's what it does. You see that third building to the right, which with the where it tapers back? It's a little bit. It's not the best example, but it shows of how that would work.
Again, I think you're going to see this addition from the street, whether it's at 8 feet or 8 feet 6. I mean, you're going to catch a glimpse of it. It's kind of going to change that view a little bit. I think it's set back. RDT has done a good job of kind of setting it back to where it is. I think the roof deck on it would have stuck out even more like a sore thumb. So I think we're a bit splitting hairs on this 6 inches, and I just think from a livability inside this space, it makes a vast difference if you're at 8.6. Commissioner Moore.
There's relatively little disclosure about the building. That's why I'm kind of like insisting the applicant has not made any concessions to what RDAT is asking for. There is no disclosure on materials, on windows, or anything. It's just basically you take it or leave it. And it is for that reason that I'm kind of like wanting to put a little bit more scrutiny on this project.
Commissioner Richards.
Would a 1-foot slope, how would you perceive it if you're standing in the room? I mean,
You'd perceive it as a sloped roof inside,
right? Like massively sloped?
I mean, 1 foot wouldn't be massively sloped. But I have a problem changing the architecture of it. Like, why? I don't think you get a ton out of going from 8 to 9 feet. And I think if you go bigger, like a 7.6 to 9.6, we're kind of monkeying with the architecture of the addition, which I think should be simple because I don't want it to stick out. And I think it starts to stick out more in the backyard where there were some people who were here testifying, about their view in the backyard.
Question for the architect, please. Can you come up to the mic? So what we're looking at here on the 8.6 drawing where the building clearly tucks behind its neighbor, where would I be standing? Is that across the street in the sidewalk?
That's across the street on the sidewalk, directly across from the house 2 doors down. The other image I showed was directly across from the house 1 door down.
Oh, but standing on there.
Additionally, if you would like the difference between 8.6 and 8.0 to a perceived eye height is 23%. The room feels a quarter taller inside, where it only feels this much taller outside.
Commissioner Moore.
I'm in support of the expansion. The only thing I will be asking is that the applicant works a little bit more closely with the department, one, to submit a complete set of drawings of what is being asked for, and work on the subtlety of what that particular transitional element is where these heights come together. The drawings as they stand, I would rather like to see this not looking from the bottom up, but from the top down. That's when the massing will be far more explicit than looking from the bottom up. So I'll be making a motion that we take DR and.
I think we already have one. You've made one.
Right, I'm sorry.
Oh, you want to amend
but
it?
That I would add that the applicant works with the department for further refinement of what is currently not even expressed in the drawings.
And you're taking out the 6 inches.
I'm still saying that the department will look at that again.
So it's not a requirement.
Mr. Lindsay, help me here.
Not quite sure. I'd rather have a specific height if, I mean,
Commissioner Fong.
President Hillis, could you, maybe I just for clarification ask Commissioner Moore to restate the motion that she had proposed without any amendments. But what I think I'm hearing from Commissioner Koppel and yourself is keeping the height at 8.6 and the removal of the roof deck. Was that what you had proposed?
Yeah, correct. I mean, I think the difference we're talking about is 6
It's
inches
6
here.
inches is what-
Commissioner Moore was taking staff's recommendation, but putting more specificity on the height of the top floor, which would be 8 feet. And I think just some of the comments, I think we're all in agreement about the roof deck and eliminating that. But the height of that addition,
From a
either
livability-
8.6 or 8.
Okay.
So what is the motion?
The motion currently is 8.6, 8 foot. It's staff's recommendation, but that top floor being 8 foot with elimination of the roof deck. Commissioner Melgar has seconded that. So that's the motion that's currently on the table, which we'll call if there's no further comment.
Call it.
So we're eliminating the 6.
The current motion, the current motion has it at 8 foot.
Very good. So the motion, or there's a motion that has been seconded to take DR and approve the matter with staff's modifications. On that motion, Commissioner Fong?
No.
Commissioner Koppel?
No.
Commissioner Melgar?
Aye.
Commissioner Moore?
Aye.
Commissioner Richards?
No.
And Commission President Hillis?
No.
That motion fails 2-4 with Commissioners Fong, Koppel, Richards, and Hillis voting against.
And Commissioner Koppel?
I'd like to make a motion to take the RDAT recommendations, except having the top floor be 8'6" with the removal of the 4th floor roof deck.
Second that.
Commissioner Moore?
I like to ask that the project will be reviewed, the final drawings will be reviewed by the department before they go further.
That's
fine.
okay with?
Yes.
that would happen, of
Yeah,
course.
that's okay with the motion maker and the seconder?
Yes.
Okay.
On that motion, then, Commissioners, to take DR and remove the roof deck, but allow the 8'6" height ceiling, floor-to-ceiling height. Commissioner Fong?
Aye.
Commissioner Koppel?
Aye.
Commissioner Melgar?
Aye.
Commissioner Moore?
Aye.
Commissioner Richards?
Aye.
And Commission President Hillis?
Aye.
So moved, Commissioners. That motion passes unanimously 6-0. Commissioners, that'll place us on item 14 for case number 2017-005643 DRP at 1709 Broderick Street. This is a request for discretionary review. There are 2 DR requesters, but through the chair, the DR requesters, both DR requesters will have a total time of 5 minutes, and the project sponsor will have a total time of 5 minutes.
And then we'll take public comment, whether you're supportive or opposed to the project after the comments.
And so, Commissioners, if I may just kind of briefly describe a bit of the posture of this permit. It's a little bit different. We have had these situations in the past, but in this case, the permit itself was issued by the department, and building inspection had been reviewed by planning department, but we, in error, did not do a BBN, a block book notification, which was on file for the property at the time. We subsequently suspended the permit, and it was appealed by I believe the DR requesters in this case, to the Board of Appeals. It's pending before the board next month, but we wanted to bring this matter to you as a DR request was filed during the BBN period that we did after the permit had been issued. Wanted to get your feedback on the project, and we will take that to the Board of Appeals when it is heard next month. Just want to reassure you that the decision of the commission today will be implemented, and we will find a way to work with the project sponsor, with Department of Building Inspection, to make sure that any changes that you have are implemented through the course of the permit review process. Thank you.
Good afternoon, President Hillis and members of the Commission. Sarah Valve of Department Staff. As Jonas said, the item before you is 2 requests for discretionary review of the subject permit at 1709 Broderick Street. The permit proposes the following physical changes to the single-family dwelling. Construction of a second-floor rear deck that is 4 feet deep, 19 feet wide, and set back from each side property line by 3 feet. A deck at the rear portion of the roof, interior modifications, construction of a 2-story bay window on the south side setback that is 10 feet from the front building wall. These modifications do not require Section 311 notice and do not constitute a change of use. Since the subject building is a Category A historic resource, a preservation planner reviewed the permit at the PIC and determined that a categorical exemption could be issued. As a result of the DR requester's concerns about physical changes to the building, the project was reviewed by the Residential Design Advisory Team, who found that a portion of the roof deck should be set back from the south side property line, and that the second floor of the bay window should be removed. The project sponsor has indicated they'll remove the roof deck entirely and the second floor of the bay window. The DR requesters have a number of other concerns regarding the building's use, how the BBN was processed, the historic nature of the block, interior modifications, and a loss of privacy as a result of the decks, and limiting the building's future use. At this time, the building's use is not proposed to be changed from its current single-family status. Should a permit be submitted to change the use, it would be reviewed for compliance with the regulations within the Planning Department's jurisdiction. The DR requesters have been provided due process. As the permit was suspended, they filed discretionary review against it, and a hearing is being held. The Secretary of the Interior standards for the treatment of historic properties permits changes to historic resources. The proposed bay window was appropriately reviewed by Preservation Planner and is minimally visible from the right-of-way. Removal of the second story of the bay window will reduce the volume of this element as it was from when it was originally permitted. The proposed interior modifications do not indicate a use other than the existing and permitted single-family dwelling. The planning code does not control interior elements such as under-stair niches, kitchen layouts, and replication of TV sets. The project sponsor has indicated they will remove the roof deck, and the residential advisory team reviewed the rear second floor deck and found it to be consistent with the guidelines. As the plans do not suggest an unpermitted use will be established on the premises, the department does not believe that a notice of special restrictions is necessary. At this time, the department recommends that the Planning Commission recommend to the Board of Appeals that they require the roof deck and the second story of the bay window be removed. Thank you, and I'm available for any questions that you might have.
Great, thank you. So DR requesters, right, there's 2 in this case?
Yes, sir. 2.
Do you want to combine the time, or do you want to take them separately?
There's a lot of pretty interesting information. If we could combine with, please, the full time allotment of 10 minutes for 2 requesters.
Yeah. I mean, because we would otherwise have, right, there's 2 requesters, so they could have 10 minutes.
Right.
And then we'll have project sponsor with 10 minutes. And then public comment. Sorry, I was thinking 5 for each DR requester, so I
Okay.
apologize. Okay, go ahead.
Thank you. All right.
So you're combining the 10?
Yes, please.
Or the two 5-minute presentations?
The 2 5-minute.
Please. Thank you, President Hillis and Commissioners Ryan Patterson on behalf of the DR requesters. This is an interesting and quite unusual case. I have been advising the neighbors on trying to resolve the problems that you're going to hear about today. Unfortunately, we've reached the point of having to come to you, and I think it's important for you to hear from the neighbors directly. So I think we'll start with that.
Good afternoon, Commissioner Hillis and other commissioners. Sorry, a little nervous. This is not my usual thing. My name is Carla Haushagen. Oh, may I have the computer, please? I'm Carla Haushagen. I've lived at 1713 Broderick for 27 years. I live 2 doors from the subject property. Brief background that I'd like to give you about the situation. The project sponsor filmed the front of the house in 1987 to use in the credits of his TV show, Full House, which ran from 1987 to 1995 and is still in wide syndication. Starting in 2016, the same credits were used in his Netflix spin-off Fuller House, which is now in its 3rd season. Using an LLC, he bought the house in August of last year. No one in the neighborhood knew who the new owner was. From August through October last year, the project sponsor restored the exterior of the house to the look of the show. He painted the exterior tan, installed custom red front doors, removed a gate at the bottom of the stairs, and removed trees. In mid-November, neighbors received a mailing from Jeff Franklin Productions, identifying Mr. Franklin as the new owner and the producer of the 2 television shows. Mr. Franklin had filming and publicity events at the house last December and again on May 4th of this year. Beginning December 1st, a year ago, the project sponsor widely promoted his purchase and restoration of the house. Articles appeared in print and online. This press barrage made it clear he restored the house as a gift to his fans, effectively promoting it for fan visits. We found over 30 articles available. I'm sure there are more. In September this year, a video promoting the 30th anniversary of Full House was released. The video shows the house extensively, suggests fans visit the house, and it suggests that the shows were actually filmed there. So what are the problems for our neighborhood? The problem is fan visits. We have visitors like we never had before. We have thousands of visitors. They are swarming our neighborhood. Because they've been made welcome, they don't just take a picture and keep going. They stay. They go up and down the stairs. They yell to each other as they take pictures, sometimes from across the street. They play the theme song, make videos, and sometimes drink. They leave trash all over. They not only visit 1709 Broderick, they trespass at our homes. They sit on our stairs, on our planters, and leave trash at our homes. Visitors don't just come in the day, they come at night, often waking neighbors. I've looked at the overnight video, and for a recent stretch of 30 nights, there were visitors at the house at very late hours for 28 of those 30 nights. They block the street, block our driveways, and stand in the street. They arrive on foot, in Ubers and Lyfts, tour buses, bicycles, go-cars, motorcycles, and mostly private cars. Horns are honked, and at busy times, the sound of car doors slamming is almost constant. Visitors cause dangerous situations. Last month, there was an accident between a car and a large delivery truck. Actually, that was October. Commissioners, someone is going to be hurt or killed. At peak times, weekends, holidays, summer days, school vacations, there is often a steady stream. 2 of us have counted visitors. They come at the rate of 250 to 300 people per hour at peak times. We easily have 1,500 people per weekend day, and on busy days more. We estimate there have been at least 250,000 visitors to our block in the past year. The numbers were a fraction of that before Mr. Franklin started promoting and changing the house. What's the source of all these problems? That's an easy question to answer. The source of the problems is the house and the project sponsor. The owner is the creator and producer of the 2 shows. He bought the house for commercial purposes. He's made it very clear he will never live in the house. He has promoted his ownership of the house and invited fans to visit. He has filmed at the house. He has changed the use from residential to commercial. Everything he has done is for the promotion of his television shows. In one article, Mr. Franklin says he hopes his ownership of the house is a write-off. A write-off is a business expense, so he must be conducting business there. Mr. Franklin is dealing in social media. Social buzz increases attention and demand for his shows. That buzz is his currency. Mr. Franklin's attorney claims a long list of mitigations that they have offered. We don't have space in our brief time here to enumerate the response to each point, but in brief, they have been largely ineffectual, and some of the mitigations claimed are just misleading or untrue. None of them would work as well as if he had not done this in the first place. I'd like to now introduce my neighbor, Rudy Muller.
Good afternoon, Commissioners. My name is Rudy Miller. I live at 1705 Broderick Street, 2 doors down. I bought my house in June 2013. What is this permit really about? We believe it's really about replicating the full house. The objective of the project sponsor is to replicate the full house, not only the exterior, but also the interior of the house, and to use the house for commercial filming, promotion, and fan visits. This permit will make that problem a lot worse. The exterior replication of the house has already been completed, as we pointed out just earlier. Approval of this permit would allow the project sponsor to complete the interior replication of the full house and establish a complete full house shrine. The plans filed with the building department show that various elements of the television show will be replicated at the house. The living room, the kitchen, and the rear deck will all be redesigned and remodeled to match the layouts in the TV show set. Allowing the sponsor to replicate the house both outside and inside will exacerbate the problems and basically going to destroy our neighborhood. The project sponsor has claimed that he has no intention to turn the house into a public shrine to the full house. It's simply not believable. Full house is already half complete, and approval of the permit will make it 100% complete. Just a quick summary of what we've presented. Project sponsor bought this house with the intention of using it for commercial filming, promotion, and fan visits, and he's already undertaken all that activity. His actions have harmed the health and well-being of the neighbors. It's destroying the residential character of our neighborhood and depriving us, the neighbors, of basic rights to privacy, clean air, convenient access to property, and safety from dangers, all as provided in the planning code. It's inappropriately using a single-family residential permit to change the use of the house for a commercial permit. Approval of this permit would allow him to complete the interior replication of the full house and establish the complete shrine and destroy our neighborhood. In addition, there are a few other very important issues with this permit. There's the failed BBN notice that was filed for the property, and the permit was issued over the counter without proper notice being given to the BBN holder, Carla. That's prejudicial. Second, the appeal is also at the Board of Appeals, and that hearing is suspended until this hearing has occurred. Procedurally, we've learned this is all is improper, as the DR hearing should normally occur before the permit is issued. Also, this is an historic block. The subject property is one of a row of 9 historical 1883 Charles Hinkle Victorian homes. Priority Policy 2 of the Planning Code states very clearly that existing housing and neighborhood character be conserved and protected in order to preserve the cultural and economic diversity of our neighborhood. The proposed bay window at the side of the house will rise to over 18 feet and still be clearly visible from the street and is inconsistent with the historic row. And one of our neighbors will go, the adjacent neighbor will talk about that. The CEQA exemption is not correct. The CADEX was issued on the basis that the proposed bay window would not be visible from the public right away, and that is false. And I remind you that this is an historic structure. So what are we asking you to do? First, require normal alterations to the property, not a film set alteration. 2, delete the elements designed to replicate the full house TV set, bay window, rear deck, living room, and kitchen remodels. 3rd, if the project sponsor refuses to delete the commercial elements, deny the permit. Lastly, the Planning Code Section 101 is very clear. It does not allow what is being proposed by the project sponsor. We implore you to protect the neighbors and the neighborhood. Thank you.
Great. Project sponsor. Welcome. You have 10 minutes.
Good afternoon, President Hillis and Commissioners. I'm Jeff Franklin. I'm the owner of 1709 Broderick and the creator and producer of Full House and Fuller House. Every episode of the show features beautiful shots of the city of San Francisco, including iconic landmarks like the Golden Gate Bridge and the Painted Ladies and classic Victorian homes like the one that I now own. Over the last 30 years, Full House has been seen by over 1 billion people worldwide. It has served as a welcoming global ambassador on behalf of San Francisco. And now that the new show is up and running and successful, it's very gratifying for me to see a new generation of young people embrace a show that promotes family and friends learning how to solve problems with love and respect. I bought this house in August 2016. I was very happy to do so. I have a strong emotional attachment to the house. I gave one interview at the time where I made some spontaneous comments that were not thought through, and that interview was picked up by a lot of outlets, but I do regret some of the things that I said, and none of them have been acted upon. I did invite all of my neighbors over for an open house to meet them and listen to their concerns. And I explained to them that I planned on commencing a much-needed renovation, a mandatory seismic retrofit. I wanted to add some decks and bring the infrastructure into the 21st century. And I told them that after that work was completed, the house would be rented out. Much has been said already today about how I have somehow turned an empty house into a commercial enterprise, and that's just not true. Yes, Netflix chose to use the exterior of the home for 2 promotional events, both approved by the San Francisco Film Commission. Those took a total of 6 hours out of the 500 days that I've owned the house, and that's been it. And most of the photos you've seen were from that 6 hours of work. I've also been accused today of seeking to build an exact replica of the interior of the Tanner family home. That's also not true. The house on the show has no ceilings. It has 3 walls. It's architecturally impossible to reproduce in the real world. The inside of that house will not be a film set. I don't know where, it's just not true. And I am seeking to create an open floor plan that's just like the ones that I've seen in my neighbors' homes. They all have open floor plans exactly like you have in front of you. My neighbors, I don't believe, are here today because they care about what I'm doing with decks and floor plans. I think they're worried about what I plan to do with the house if I'm ever allowed to finish it. And if someday I were to apply for a special use permit, which I have not done and which I have no intention of doing, then that would be the appropriate time for them to make their case. I really actually do sympathize with my neighbors. It's clear they're very unhappy about the situation out there. But Full House fans have been coming there for the last 30 years. And they will be coming for the next 30 years. And if their numbers are increasing, it's not because I own the house. It's not because I gave one interview 18 months ago. And it's not because of what color it's painted. It's because the new show is a hit, and Full House and Fuller House are even more significant in the pop culture. And that would be going on regardless of who owned the house and what it looked like. But I have listened, and I've tried to be helpful. I've posted signs and used social media to encourage fans to be courteous and follow all parking and traffic laws. Most of these fans are very sweet people who mean no harm. They just come by, grab a photo, and move on. I've met with local tour companies to discourage evening visits. I've asked them to respect the new no double parking signs that I worked with the SFMTA to install. And I also hired on-site security services. The neighbors have asked me to abandon my rooftop deck and the second-story bay window, and I've agreed to do so because I'm trying to work with them. But this house has sat empty and uninhabitable with the interior demolished and the walls wide open for almost 1 year. It's a fire hazard. There's no sprinklers in there. It desperately needs waterproofing, and the wood beams are rotting away, and the costs of fixing this house are mounting substantially. So I respectfully request that you allow me to move forward with the previously permitted renovations. Thank you, and if there's more time, Liz, do you want to? There you are. Okay, this is my attorney, Liz Bridges.
You have 4 minutes left.
Good afternoon, Commissioners. Liz Bridges, I'm counsel for the project sponsor. And I'm just going to touch on two things briefly. One, the DR requesters have argued that this has been a change of use, that Mr. Franklin's ownership of the property necessarily changed the use of the property. And that's not the case here. There hasn't been a change of the actual use of the property. It's still a single-family home. It's actually uninhabited at the moment, and no change of use has been proposed. What has changed, actually, is the popularity of the TV show that has the likeness of the house. And it's clear to me that you have the jurisdiction to control the land use of the house, how the house is actually used. But it's not clear to me that you have jurisdiction over how the likeness of the house is used. And that seems to be the issue that is the problem that the neighbors are having, is how this likeness of this house is being used in the television shows and in the media. The other thing that I wanted to address with you is the request by the DR requesters to revoke the permit. You know, they bring up the issue of the block book notification, and I'll just note that that was not any fault of my clients, and that he shouldn't be punished for a mistake that was not out of his control. I'd also like to say that revoking the permit wouldn't actually accomplish anything other than get us back here in 3 to 6 months. As Mr. Franklin mentioned, there are many improvements that need to be made to the house for life safety reasons, the seismic upgrade, electrical, plumbing, and then just bringing the interior of the house into modern standards. Those improvements need to be made for the house to become habitable. They're going to have to be made at some point. So if you revoke the permit, then we're going to submit a new application for a very similar, if not identical, permit as soon as it would be allowed. I expect that the DR requesters would again appeal the permit, and we'd be back here. So let's not do that. Let's resolve the issue today, here and now. Thank you for your time, and I would also add that our communications team is here if you have any questions about any of the efforts that we've taken to address any of the neighbors' concerns, and I'm certainly welcome to answer any questions you might have. Thank you.
All right, thank you. So we'll open this item up now for public comment. And I see there's a number of people here probably who would like to comment, so if you want to just kind of come in any order, but you can line up on the screen side of the room so we can move through those who would like to speak.
May I use the computer? Okay. Good afternoon, Commissioners. My name is Craig Baum, and my wife and I live directly next door at 1711 Broderick Street. My wife wanted to be here today, but she is an elementary school teacher and is still at work. So Carla and Rudy are showing a brief video of the view from my living room, right out my living room window, as I make my comments. We bought our home in October of last year. Prior to purchasing, we visited the home 3 to 4 times and combined spent a few hours on Broderick Street. We didn't initially realize the full house was even next door because there weren't any visitors on the block. Over the few hours spanning multiple days we spent visiting our future home, we might have seen 3 to 5 visitors combined. In fact, a big part of the reason why we were attracted to our home is that it seemed like a nice, quiet street and a great neighborhood to raise a family. We knew through disclosures the house next door had been the full house, but based on spending several hours there, it didn't seem like a huge issue. And for the first month after we moved in, it really wasn't a noticeable problem. All of this changed at the beginning of December when Mr. Franklin announced on multiple news and social media outlets that he had purchased the 1709 property as a gift to the show's fans. Additionally, Mr. Franklin held a large publicity event for the fuller house around the same time. The fan visits skyrocketed. Visitors outside our new home went from a minor inconvenience to a major nuisance. The daily disruptions are countless. We no longer have privacy in our home. As fans constantly loiter on Mr. Franklin's front steps, they have a direct view into our house. The front part of our house is now entirely useless due to the noise and lack of privacy. We no longer have a clean property. People leave their trash in our driveway, on our front steps, or dump it in our tree basins. We no longer have free or convenient access to our garage. It is extremely difficult to enter or exit, as we have to wait for visitors to move themselves, their belongings, and most often their cars. And we no longer have a peaceful and quiet street. The crowds of people that come and stay create excessive noise that is a constant issue compared to the quiet street we hope to live on. Had we known the mess Mr. Franklin was going to create, I don't think we would have purchased our home. It is very clear that Mr. Franklin purchased this property to benefit his commercial interests. Mr. Franklin has stated unequivocally he never plans to live in the home. I strongly believe Mr. Franklin wants the visitors to continue. The more visitors come, the better it is for his show. Mr. Franklin does not live on Broderick Street, nor does he live in San Francisco or have any plans to move here. He does not have to deal with the daily disruption or violation of privacy that he's created for the rest of us. Thank you.
Thank you. Next speaker, please.
Yes, of course. Just please put them down.
Computer, please.
Hello, my name is Kate Webster Cox, and I am the next door neighbor to 1709 with my husband Pete Cox. Thank you for having us today and for listening to our concerns. We've been living in the home since 1996, and I'm here to talk about the upper and lower portion of the bay window being proposed. In this document that was created, you can see with the yellow lines what the extension of the bay window will look like from the street. Both bays are going to be visible from the street. Our 1700 block has a repeated pattern and rhythm of lot width and side yard spacing. On page 15 of the residential design guidelines, it states, respect the existing pattern of the side spacing. Next slide. In an excerpt from the guidelines, it also reads, the overall side yard pattern is consistent, creating a defining characteristic of the block face. As you can see in this slide, there is a slot of light and air that goes between the two buildings. And also in this photo, you can also see a tree in the backyard of one of the properties, neighboring properties. Not one house on this 1700 block of Broderick Street has two projections into the side yard like this project is proposing. So when you look at this sheet that I've created for you, you will look at the existing elevation up on top. You will see a projection that already exists in the back of the building, as well as a bay window that is being proposed for the front section of the building. So, like I said, there are no other buildings on this block that have two protrusions into the side yard, like this project is proposing. The lower portion of the bay window area under the bay window is going to also be synonymous to this understair nook, and it's a key feature in the full house stage set. The extension of this bay window or nook is not consistent with the air and light quality of the side yards as shown in the slides that we've shown previously. It also interferes. You can look up on the screen here. You can see this is my home on the left-hand side with the staircase. Tourists are going to come up onto the stair, and they're going to take photos looking into the bay window. They're very curious people. The historic character of our block is documented in the book Here Today. Here it is. On page 253, it focuses on the consistency of the massing and the architecture by Hinkle from 1883. Without careful consideration, this historic character may be here today, but it is going to be gone tomorrow. Please, thank you for your consideration and for listening to our concerns. Thank you.
Thank you. Next speaker, please.
Can I have the computer, and does it have sound?
Don't think so.
It does not.
It does not?
Is sound possible?
But it's, I think if you put the mic up to it.
It might be, if you turn the volume way up.
Yeah, okay, go
Full
ahead.
House, Fuller House has become a landmark. People make that a destination photo on their trips.
It feels a little surreal after all these years. There's so much history right here on this street with this house.
People have related more and more to the show every year that it's been on. Well, we certainly didn't know, but we were like the first, modern family, the new normal.
In 30 years from now, Candace and Andrea and I will be coming back as the legacy cast. Ah, jeez.
We never want to leave this soundstage. It's a very special set. It felt like a family 30 years ago, and it still feels like a family today.
Mr. Franklin came up here and he said he's done no promotion since that accidental comment. This was in September. He's actively promoting the house through his association with Netflix and the show. It's commercial activity, plain and simple. I know that there was a comment earlier about due process. I think we do have a right to due process because he's already changed the use of the house, as this clearly demonstrates. And it clearly demonstrates that they're conflating the use of the show, the front of the house, with the studio inside. People point at the house, actors point at the house and say, this is where it happened. And everybody can see it's on Broderick Street. That is clearly commercial use. It was this September, just a couple weeks ago. That's the main point I want to make, but I'll check my notes for a few other things. So he clearly is not going to live here, as people have said. He also will be, he's also remodeled the interior of the house to look like a film set. He can claim that he's not going to use it as a studio set, but does anyone here really believe that if he remodels the house completely to look like a film studio, he isn't going to use it at some point? He isn't going to ask for filming permissions to go into the house? The actors themselves say that they would love to come back here in 30 years. He's purposely trying to push this beyond what's reasonable. Look, I live right next door. I don't want it's a horrible situation as is. With this new window coming out, people are going to be coming up my stairs to take a picture through that window. If you don't act now, I'm not going to have recourse later. That's the problem that we have. And for him, it's relatively cheap. He gets a film studio, a destination site for the price of a residential permit in San Francisco.
Thank you. Next speaker, please.
My name is William Sorrow. I live at 2809 Pine Street, and we purchased our home in 1989. Even though we live around the corner from the Full House house, we suffer through the same dangerous traffic and issues caused by the promotion of the Full House property as a tourist attraction. The cars not only double park and line up on Broderick, but they actually wrap around Pine Street, and occasionally we can't even get in our own garage because there's a car parked there of people wandering back or forth between the Full House and their vehicle. Again, I said a tourist attraction, and I believe this was the plan all along, to create a promotional business structure, very much like a billboard. It would boost the popularity and profits of the Full House franchise. When a family or a visitor visits the house, takes a picture, posts it online, that boosts viewership for the Full House reruns and for the Netflix spin-off. It's as if you took a single-family home in San Francisco and shrink-wrapped it with a plastic billboard. That would require city approval and a change of use. This is exactly what is happening at 1709 Broderick Street. If you do a search on Google for Full House house, it's kind of interesting. It says Full House house, tourist attraction in San Francisco. And then on the bottom, kind of interesting. You own this.
Mr. Sora, if you just talk into the mic, that would be helpful.
I'm very sorry. As again, it says tourist attraction, and on the bottom, Do you own this business? I think that says it all. I believe the permit should not be allowed. Thank you much.
Thank you. Next speaker, please.
Hello, my name is Valerie Avril. I've lived on Broderick Street for 12 years and I work from home. My kitchen and living room face the full house, as does my garage. As such, I feel that I'm in a privileged position to talk about the changes that have taken place since Mr. Franklin purchased the property and started marketing it. Before Mr. Franklin's ownership, it was nothing more than an inconvenience and a cause for minor irritation. But now living across from the full house has become a cause of ongoing stress, which could easily be called a form of harassment. Whether I'm having breakfast, lunch, or dinner in my kitchen, it is guaranteed there will be more or less constant noise. Car horns, screams, fans singing or playing the theme song, and slam breaks that can make me jump out of my chair. Many fans don't just take a photo and go. They socialize on the sidewalk, sometimes they bring alcohol, and linger around 30 minutes or more. For these reasons, I can't ever conduct work phone calls in my kitchen or living room anymore. I have been woken up at nights by noisy fans at the property. Use of my living room is also impaired. I used to take naps in my front bay window, but now, despite dual pane windows, those naps are impossible. Coming in and out of my garage is no longer simple or safe either. Fans block my driveway or just stand there. Sometimes my polite request to people to move has been met with hostility, lewd gestures, or flatly ignored. While I've always felt safe living in this neighborhood, there are times when it's no longer the case. I don't look forward to coming home after trips because I know I'm going to have to deal with this ongoing abuse. Because of the exponential number of fans in the past 12 months, our street feels like a giant pressure cooker about to explode. While walking out of my garage, I witnessed 2 violent altercations between Full House fans in a double-parked vehicle and passing drivers trying to get to their destination. Separately, I would also like to address Mrs. Bridges' comments regarding the security guard, which claims shows Mr. Franklin's effort to mitigate the impacts. After Supervisor Farrell's staff suggested to Mr. Franklin's team the hiring of a security guard, no action was taken for 7 months. When the guard did arrive in September, he quickly proved to be incompetent. I frequently saw him sleeping in his car, hiding in the alley, staring at his smartphone, taking photographs or socializing with fans, and ignoring the problem he was hired to fix. At one point, he even told me that if we didn't like living in the Full House, we should move. Contrary to Mrs. Bridges' assertions, none of the neighbors ever harassed him. His employment was terminated mid-October because he made matters worse, and since then, no new guard has been provided. I'll conclude with the following. In the first 11 years I've lived here, there were friendly interaction between the neighbors, but not a sense of cohesion. Since last year, we've seen the entire block mobilized around this issue because all of us see that Mr. Franklin's action severely impact our quality of life. Mr. Franklin is not a neighbor. He does not live here, and he does not intend to live here. He does not have to live with the consequences of his action. I do not understand why the Commission could value the interest of an absentee, commercially minded owner over the interest of the long-term residents of this community who have to deal on a daily basis with this nuisance. Thank you.
Thank you. Next speaker, please.
Good afternoon, Commissioners. My name is David Natcher. My wife Pamela and I are native San Franciscans and have lived at our home at 1715 Broderick for over 46 years. In that time, we've seen and experienced many changes in our neighborhood, many good, some bad. Without doubt, the worst thing we have faced is the aggressive efforts of Mr. Franklin to make 1709 Broderick Street into a full-time promotion for his TV shows. His actions and promotional activities have turned our street into an artificial tourist destination, the focus of which is his Full House house only 3 doors down from us. The sponsor's presentation tries to maintain the house has always attracted significant attention and fan visits. One can understand why they would make this claim, but it is simply not true. We did notice fans visiting our streets once the location became known on the internet, but they were infrequent, and relatively few in number. In fact, a Yelp page dedicated to the Full House house warned fans away from visiting 1709 Broderick because at that time the house did not look at all like what was seen on TV. However, after Mr. Franklin's remake of the house, taking it back to the look of 1987, and the publicity deluge in December of 2016, we have seen a massive increase in fan visitations, and they are the direct result of Mr. Franklin's promotional activity. The sponsor makes the point that 1709 is the Full House house, and that is a bell that cannot be unrung. However, even if Mr. Franklin believes that's true, why does he keep ringing that bell? The modifications Mr. Franklin is proposing are not a routine remodel, but a blatant effort to make the interior closely resemble the house on the TV series. The stated aim is to make the house, both inside and outside, look and feel like the characters in his show actually live there. That's something he promised in published interviews. The publicity that is sure to follow any such transformation would undoubtedly draw even more fans. And we wonder why Mr. Franklin has to be here at all. In early 2016, Mr. Franklin built a replica of the Full House house on the Warner Brothers back lot. He has never used it in a sitcom. It stands idle. If he'd used that instead of 1709 Broadwick, we might still have a normal neighborhood. We should note Mr. Franklin is no stranger to property use disputes. Down in Beverly Hills, a neighbor was attempting to develop property adjacent to Mr. Franklin's $34,016,000 square foot mansion. Mr. Franklin fought this development as being inconsistent with his neighborhood, and he expressed concern the project would damage his quality of life. Through the same concerns we have with Mr. Franklin, except the quality of life is already seriously damaged thanks to his action.
Thank you, sir. Your time is up.
Next speaker, please.
Good afternoon, Commission. I'm Pamela Natcher, and I've lived at 1715 Broderick Street for over 46 years. I've been requested by one of our neighbors, Mr. Dave Hollister, to read his letter to you. Dear members of the Planning Commission, I am writing this letter in opposition to the project at 1709 Broderick Street that is up for a discretionary review hearing on December 7th, 2017. I live at 2726 Bush Street, and our family has lived in the neighborhood since 1997. Additionally, my wife has grown up in the neighborhood since 1977. I will be very direct in my letter. Since Mr. Franklin began promoting his newly purchased house at 1709 Broderick Street, the traffic in front of the house has exploded and has been nothing less than chaotic. We have 4 children who walk to school and activities daily, and I'm quite worried about their safety. The inconsiderate and careless drivers in front of and driving by the house are of great concern to my children's safety. I have witnessed several careless and reckless examples, and I'm generally fearful daily for my children being seriously injured or killed. I request that the Planning Commission accept the request for discretionary review and require the project sponsor to seek a permit for this change and use to alleviate the traffic chaos in the neighborhood. Please accept this heartfelt and urgent request. Sincerely, David Hollister. As a wife and a mother and a grandmother, I firmly agree with Mr. Hollister's letter. My husband and I raised 2 children at 1715 Broderick Street, and in that time period, we never had to worry about what we're having to worry about today. Please, please, please consider a very stringent review. Thank you.
Thank you. Next speaker, please.
Good afternoon. My name is Lisa DePaulis. I live at 1730 Broderick Street, which is right across the street from 1709. I have owned and lived in my property for 17 years. And first, I'll just begin by underscoring everything that you've heard, the testimony, which is very, very true. I'm here to share how this has impacted my life over the last year. First of all, it has impacted our peace. Our lovely, quiet, peaceful neighborhood changed a year ago. And where I could have peace, I no longer have peace. This has impacted my ability to make a living, to properly work from my home. It has impacted my ability it has impacted my stress. So a few examples. I have to work from home. I was on a conference call with the Chief Technology Officer from SF MoMA, and he was at 6 p.m. at night, and he was trying to explain to me some issues he was having with software we sold him. We had a dueling horn session, and he had to keep stopping explaining the problem with the software until I had to, in a very embarrassed way, apologize and share I'm putting my phone on mute so that he could finish the story, but I'm listening. When I'm on a conference call, sometimes internationally, it is a Russian roulette when I have to unmute my phone to contribute to the call because of the horns and the sounds. I'm worried about my personal safety. First of all, one day I was slowly backing out of my garage. I own a garage. I very much have the same concerns Valerie does. And a woman screamed. Now, I knew I couldn't hurt anyone because I was easing out. I put my car into park, and I thought I was going to have a heart attack. I thought I hit a child. I jumped out, and I saw everything was okay, and I yelled to the woman, "What are you doing?" "I'm doing the best I can." And you know what she said to me? "I'm sorry, dear. I was yelling at my daughter who jumped in front of your car that was backing up." The horns. I like Valerie, I work sometimes 60, 70-hour weeks, and sometimes be able to take a nap on a weekend has been a luxury that is long gone. There are always horns. On Thanksgiving Day, I must have put my head out the window 13 times to ask people to please keep the noise down. These people are not kind. They're belligerent and scary. I have been attacked. I have had very obscene gestures. And just this past Saturday, I was bringing home a sick cat, a neighbor of mine that was in London, and I had the car, so I was bringing it back from the vet, and someone was blocking my driveway. So I got out of my car, and I asked, is this anyone's car? And the one gentleman that said no actually was blocking Valerie's driveway, facing the wrong side of the street. And so I started to take the cat out of the car, and the girls came to get in the car. And I said, "Excuse me, did you not?" Because they called across, "Does anyone have that car?" And essentially they said, "Listen, bitch," I'm sorry, "listen, bitch, this is our time. We're only here for a few minutes." So in summary, the crowds, it has impacted our stress.
Thank you. I've got your 3 minutes is up.
Okay, thank you. Thank you very much.
All right. Next speaker, please.
Hello, my name is Andrea Scott Finney, and I thank you for having me here today. I just wanted to say that I've been at that residence for over 47 years myself personally, and my family has owned that building since 1943. So we have been always, I'm old enough to remember being a child playing on the street there. I've been in every house in the neighborhood on both sides because we were just friendly neighbors. It has always been that way. Now something unique has happened there that doesn't feel correct to us at all. The children cannot play. We had neighbors that have children, they had to move away. I wouldn't have my children in a neighborhood where there's strangers going up and down the street. My concern also is all the legal aspect of what's happening. There is double parking, there's trespassing, there's littering, there's loitering, there's every type of unauthorized type of events happening that would happen in any public place that does not have authority there, making sure that things move, crowd control, and move in an appropriate type of a way. The neighborhood has changed so drastically, we can't sleep at night. Songs, people want to know why I'm there. Am I the maid? They feel entitled. That's just public. I don't think Mr. Franklin knew that would happen. But because he doesn't live there, he doesn't see all of the pitfalls that happen to our property and our neighbor's property. We're rooted and grounded in San Francisco. I'm a native. My family's native. We've been here since the early 40s, and we just are not used to this type of a tremendous amount of people all over the neighborhood all of the time. If we're going to stay in San Francisco and continue to be happy, we're going to have a little bit better situation. Thanks.
Thank you. Any additional public comment on this item? Seeing none, we'll close public comment and open it up to commissioners.
Sorry, I think rebuttal.
Well, since we're not in it, this is not a typical DR scenario. We're making a recommendation, so that's why we mentioned at the beginning how we're going to do it. So it's not, we're not in the DR mode here, unfortunately. Commissioner Richards, but we may have questions for you.
So when I read the case packet and I talked with some of the project sponsors team, I had a hard time connecting the building permits to the quality of life issues, interior renovations, what seemed to be an atrocious kind of bay window, a big deal. As with a lot of times when I get a new perspective, it's because of the folks that come and testify before us. You had a pretty convincing case or argument that clearly the actions of one person over the course of the last 18 months have really affected your ability to enjoy the place that you've lived in for probably many, many years. Interestingly enough, I'm sitting here and somebody used the word shrine. I believe it was Mr. Franklin. I do want to commend you, Mr. Franklin, for coming and facing us and giving us your version of things. Normally, it's the PR people and the attorneys, and we never know who the project sponsor is, so I really want to say thanks. I respect you a lot for that. Somebody said shrine, and I'm sitting here thinking to myself, what other kind of like shrine-like places do we have in San Francisco? Painted ladies on Steiner Street. I don't live far from there. People come and go all the time and take pictures. There's traffic, but generally it's diffused because you have Alamo Square. They stand in the park. They're on, Golden Gate or whatever other, or McAllister Street or Fulton Street. Lombard Street. Supervisor Farrell wanted to charge people $100 to drive down Lombard Street to mitigate the effects of it being a tourist destination or a shrine. Those are the only two I can actually think of, maybe other than this one. You may even get more visitors here than Lombard Street, apparently. It sounds like, judging from the numbers, whether they're accurate. A few other things came to mind here, and this is kind of one of the weirdest cases I've had in 3.5 years. We're dealing with a building permit, a quality of life issue as a result of a building permit, which it's hard to make a connection there for me. Whether Mr. Franklin owns the building or not, whether these building permits are granted or not, Mr. Franklin can sit in Beverly Hills and promote this house all he wants, and you still have a problem. I mean, I'm just sitting here thinking, how do we mitigate this? He just unfortunately, or fortunately, owns the building that he's promoting. It looks like there really needs to be some level of mitigation here, but the question then is, what is our jurisdiction on that? We could not approve. We could recommend to the Board of Appeals not to grant the permit to make the house as replicable as it is. Is that really going to do anything? Probably not. It might be a token gesture to the neighbors. Mr. Franklin doesn't live here. He's going to change the inside of the house. He wanted to have it be more like his neighbors. I don't really see the point of that if you're not going to live here. You should have maybe left it the way it was, because there's probably fine craftsmanship that you took down to the studs now, and that's all in some garbage heap somewhere. Putting the bay window on really, to me, serves no real purpose. It's not like you're taking asbestos siding off a house and putting the detail back to bring the historic, make the house more historic, taking it the right way. Actually, I think you're taking it the wrong way, because you've got a set of uniform buildings that are all built at the same time by the same person that are historic. And even though the bay window replicates the style of architecture, it's fake. And how many square feet do you get from that over 2 floors? I think I saw a day sitting area. It seems like it doesn't seem like it really serves any purpose. I think if we have any jurisdiction, or if the Board of Appeals has any jurisdiction, like we do with medical cannabis dispensaries, we should require some mitigation of what's happening here. And things that came to mind were apparently the security officer didn't work. He may have been incompetent, but I was thinking more in the lines of an SFMTA traffic control officer who stands there and makes sure people don't double park. An off-duty police officer, like people hire for special events. Apparently this is a special event many hours of the day. A 13B special patrol officer. Mr. Franklin has the power to go to the police commission and grant a district there on your street and have a 13B officer there whose responsibility is to keep order. They don't carry guns or anything because they're not there for violent, acts and things. They're there to basically keep order. They roam my neighborhood. I live in a 13B district, and they generally keep order as best they can. People respect the badge. The neighbors also have, and I'm no attorney, a civil suit, a nuisance. He's created a nuisance. Stop promoting it. There can be an injunction. There's all these different things you could do. But the building permit at hand that we have now, I would recommend not having the bay window. The interior renovations are the interior renovations. I'd also recommend putting a gate up on the front steps so that people cannot climb those steps and look in the neighbors' windows. That's kind of all right now I can come up with. Thanks to the public for educating me on what the impact has been.
Commissioner Fong.
Thank you. This is very interesting, and like Commissioner Richards, not sure exactly where I am, but just pointing out some obvious things, but things for us maybe to consider. And there are some houses in the city. Mrs. Doubtfire's house, Haas Lilienthal house has become a museum. Flood Mansion has become a school. In many of those cases, with the exception of the Mrs. Doubtfire house, they did convert to commercial or educational use, and this is not what we're looking at. We're not looking at a formal conversion into a commercial use. Stepping aside for a second, this is, to me, a little bit of an embarrassment of riches in that San Francisco is so darn cool that Hollywood wants to, show us, and so that's one of the privileges of living in San Francisco that we do have to deal with. The concerns from the neighbors, though, while taking apart just separating the land use issues and the bay window bulb out or slide out, like Commissioner Richards, I don't really see that much advantage to doing that. I don't know what you gain, what the house gains by doing that, and so that leads the neighbors to believe that there is intent, and I believe that maybe there is an intent to try to bring it back to the set design. But there's not too much livability that is gained by that 3 feet, in my opinion, in that living room. And I think the neighbors' concerns are legitimate. I mean, I see the videos. Our kids go to school nearby there, so but they're really traffic concerns, DPT concerns. Alamo Square, the Painted Ladies recently approved some policy that doesn't allow tour buses to drop off or even go in front of the Painted Ladies anymore. So they cleverly drop them off on the corner of Alamo Square and have them walk down the hill, which is probably a better experience, but there's no diesel engines accelerating up and down the hills and braking. So that's a DPT concern, or MTA, whoever handles that. The Film Commission, I think, is plays a role in this if they're going to limit the number of filmings or any kind of TV shooting, commercial shooting to happen on there. I don't know if we have the ability to make a recommendation to limit the number of that if that should occur. But it's kind of a multi-jurisdictional piece. I could see, and I don't want to speculate for the project sponsor, how you could turn this into a 90-day Airbnb. Which is it's not against the law, it's totally legal, rent it out for a couple of events a year, and it still add more attraction than it is now. It's difficult to predict what the attraction is going to be going forward. It is, as it is an older but cult-like television show that just amazes me that it still has the sticking power, which is great. So I'm not sure where I am, but just purely from the land use building perspective, I don't see this as necessary, having that slide out, that extension of the bay window. and slowly look at that. I would like to, though, find out what we have ability to enforce as far as Department of Public Parking and Traffic, as well as the Film Commission. And if we can, maybe forever say that this cannot be converted into a conditional use to a commercial type of use, which I believe is, I don't know the will not, but I'd like to get a little more information.
Commissioner Moore.
Being attractive comes at a price. What interests me is to follow thoughtful deliberations between the Commission, and all points discussed really strike me as being thoughtful and on point. However, there is another layer, and I want to try to go there. One, we are in a normal neighborhood. It's RH2. It used to be, as described by many of the neighbors who have lived there for decades, a quiet street on which children used to play on the block, and that is the way we like our neighborhoods to be. We have an unusual case that we have 9 identical historic buildings in Category A as a Category A resource, which should kind of raise our kind of sensitivities towards being extra careful of what we do here. On the other hand, as Commissioner Richards and Commissioner Fong summarized, we have several like situations, not quite the same, like Lombard Street, Painted Ladies, etc., where the attractiveness of these particular places has become so unmanageable, they make the situation for people unlivable. I live close to Lombard Street, it's a crooked street, and when I go north on the weekend, I get myself into huge traffic jams, very dangerous situations with people crossing streets or parking in the middle of the block. When a fire engine goes by, it's basically unmanageable. And I think we are here at the cusp of deciding something where we can help prevent this kind of thing. And again, attractiveness comes comes with a price. I don't believe that the bay window is necessary at all. When you look at the plans, and I'm not judging as much from the inside as I judge from the outside, it's for the type of building unnecessary, and I would agree with the two of them that that is something I would not consider even approving. But I like to go further to look at an RH2 building in a residential neighborhood of being a non-contributor to residential. The shrine comment that was repeated by people is of great concern to me. We do not need empty houses like the Winchester Mystery House or so in our neighborhoods. And while this is probably a very expensive building, we still want people to live there and contribute to the wholeness of a neighborhood. That is my basic, my basic sticking point here. So I look at, and I'm going to ask Zoning Administrator Sanchez, I believe that the use of the building as a shrine, as a Netflix billboard attractiveness thing, it is a change in use. And how do we deal with that? How do we have comparable situations? Did we have the Crooked Street on Lombard Street before the use of cars as being something where we had restrictions? That should be a garden. That should be an open space. There shouldn't be any cars going down that street. For all intents and purposes, people want to walk, that's fine. But I'm taking a slightly more radical look at conditions which don't quite translate themselves as compatible land use into the way we want to use them at this very moment.
Thank you. So a vacancy of a building or of a dwelling unit is not a change of use. I mean, we wouldn't look at that as the fact that the building is vacant as a change of use to quote-unquote shrine. I mean, perhaps the project sponsor can enlighten this further about their intended use moving forward and whether it will be occupied or not. In terms of changes of use, we generally look at filming, video production as an arts activity. That's an entertainment use, which would not be allowed in this zoning district. That said, that is, for a full-on change of use, which would then be subject to Section 317 because it's no longer residential. That they can't even get to the end point because that use is not allowed. Separately, something which the planning code does not regulate is, because there's a whole spectrum of this artistic use of filming. I mean, at what point when everyone has a video camera, if 4K HD in their pockets, probably, that we're seeing movies in the theaters filmed on phones. At what point does your home, you may upload it to YouTube, you may have 1 million followers. At what point does just your kind of personal actions constitute an arts activity versus completely changing it into a film production studio? So if people are filming kind of videos in their own home and then uploading it to YouTube and making money off of that, is that an arts activity? Is that a change of use under the planning code? I think that's a side where we would say, no, it's not a change of use. That's more of a personal use. But the planning code doesn't really define that in kind of the shorter term filming, and just like the happenstance. I mean, I would say that in this case, they haven't changed the use. They are, as I understand, are not filming. This is not a filming set. Just the fact that it's vacant does not make it a change of use.
We are not to comment on the interior. However, I would say, and I'm not trying to dominate this microphone here, that the ground floor use or the layout of the ground floor use does not speak to somebody wanting to occupy this building. The way this ground floor use is laid out on whatever the sheet number is, I can give it to you. I think it's A4.0, clearly indicates that there are other intentions than a residential use. The sequence of rooms, the way things are oriented, it looks more like a staging space for either a reception, a party, or whatever, but it is not a typical layout for a residential use.
And what specifically is that? Is that the storage space that they have?
It is the sequence of rooms. How, and I'm looking at the final set of how a full bathroom with shower opens to the garage. You step into a laundry room, and right as you open the door, you're stepping into another bathroom. That is a sequence of rooms that is completely atypical for residential. When you look at the previous set, which is in front of what the final set is, it shows more layout on that particular floor, which does not speak to residential.
I would say that I would agree that a full bathroom off of the closet, or sorry, off the garage,
you can track that with a slightly more discerning eye all the way through, and it just doesn't quite hold. And it is really at this moment the pretense of residential versus something. We're not talking about the interior. We're talking about how the building is being used. For if this is supposed to be RH2 active residential in a San Francisco neighborhood, then I think this particular land use depiction doesn't pass muster. That would be my comment here.
Commissioner Koppel.
Thanks, Mr. President. I'm very sympathetic with the neighbors. I have some similar experiences. I live in the Sunset near Golden Gate Park, very close to a major entrance towards the polo fields, and 2 times a year, my living situation, my house is disrupted for weeks. The Hardly Strictly Bluegrass Festival and the Outside Lands Music Festival are both very close to my house, and for weeks up until the time of the event, everything is different. Everything changes, literally. My sister and I have to time what we do when we do it often, and there's nothing we can do about that. That doesn't even take into consideration when the actual concert is in effect. So Friday through Sunday, our lives around our house are a complete different ballgame. And so we embrace it. There's nothing we can do about that. There's maybe 100,000 people that could literally very easily walk in front of our house. People are drinking. People are enjoying themselves. People are taking pictures. There's a lot of things going on. They're going on right in front of my house. I can't do anything about that. I don't think that Mr. Franklin is necessarily doing anything illegal here that would warrant us kind of coming down on him. I mean, I would definitely want to see all mitigation measures taken. I do like the fact that, again, like Commissioner Richards says, he is here today. We often are talking to a representative instead of the actual person in question. That is a big help for us, I think. Him going through the Film Commission for all of his events, I think, is a very important and commendable step. I hope that the neighbors are notified of any such event. I mean, that's all, speaking for myself, I at least know when those 2 concerts are coming up a year. I put them in my calendar a year in advance, every year, just so I can make plans accordingly. If I want to get out of town, I can get out of town. But as long as you're notified of these events, I don't see what we can do to tell him to stop. As far as the actual house, I mean, is this house historic? Does that come into the equation at all?
The building is a Class A. It's a known historic resource.
Okay. And so, he owns the house, and so if he wants to paint the house, he can paint the house. I'm leaning towards the recommendations of staff and the RDAT on our packet as of now. So I'm not, siding with one person or the other. I'm looking at the situation as a whole, and we do live in San Francisco. This is a very touristy, very popular city, and we all choose to live here. And as far as what can be done to the house, I'm leaning towards what's recommended in the packet.
Commissioner Melgar.
So this is fascinating. I'm fascinated by your take on it, zoning administrator. The house is vacant, so it's not really a change of use, but we live in a virtual world where it can, essentially be an advertisement virtually, and then people come physically, which really wasn't possible really 15, 20 years ago, but now it is. And so that it just opens up a whole bunch of questions, about what is the use, that in ways that I hadn't thought about before. I think that, I also, come down to support the recommendations to the Board of Appeals. Although I completely disagree with you, Commissioner Koppel, but I really don't see what else we can do at this point. I don't like the bay window. I think, that should go, so I'm with that. But I do think that it fundamentally changes the neighborhood. We have zoning for a reason. This is a commercial use. So technically, it's vacant and it's not, but it has led to an influx of people that use it as a commercial use, even though they're not paying for it, they're not going inside the house. The house was lovely before. They took off the gate that was there before, I think on purpose, so that people would go up the stairs and make it, interact with the house as if it were the Full House house, and painted it. The owner, Mr. Franklin, thank you for coming, but was quoted in the media saying that he had plans for the house to make it available to fans, which, I get, that I respect. I actually am a big fan of both the shows. I have kids who watch them. But that is a commercial use in terms of, the interaction of the fans with the neighbors. So it's tricky. It's fascinating, in terms of what our jurisdiction is and what we can do. I think that all we can do at this point is, support the recommendations to the Board of Appeals. But I think that we're going to have to think about this a little bit more because, as Commissioner Koppel said, we do live in a city that's full of historic spots, Thankfully, the House of, the Witches is actually in LA and not here. But I think that if that were here, we would have that also. There are places that are historic and, have fans all over San Francisco. But now that, they can be promoted, online and attached to a campaign that promotes a film, it just opens up a whole new world. So.
And just to echo some of the... For one, I think the staff's recommendation was one floor of the bay window. And I think Commissioner Richards in probably you support removing the entire bay window, which I would agree. I don't think it really does much to the home. I think from just a historic standpoint, whether this is the full house or the fuller house or whatever it is, to get rid of that bay window all the way to the ground. So that would be an alteration to staff's recommendation. But I think, like everybody said, this is an interesting case. But if Mr. Franklin didn't own the home and somebody else did, they'd be acting a little differently. I think that they try to discourage people from coming there and not necessarily encourage people from coming there. And I get it. You come from a different standpoint, but these folks live in this neighborhood and have to deal with this. I say to myself, what would I do if I owned this house? Because you really can't do. It's a great historic home. There's not a lot you could do. You'd paint it probably a different color. So obviously that red door is a bit of a beacon for people as I look through kind of the advertisement for the home, and I'd paint it. I don't know if we can encourage you to act as if you were a homeowner here and not promoting the show. And I just found out this morning too that my daughter watches it. That's what she's doing upstairs with her phone, watching Fuller House. And I think I watched the show before. I always thought they lived in Alamo Square in the Painted Ladies because you didn't highlight the home as much. So, that's another thing you can do. And obviously, or Netflix has control. Don't, highlight San Francisco. Don't necessarily highlight the home. But these days with the internet, people can quickly search it and find out where they lived. So, just a question to the zoning administrator. Commercial use, the commercial uses that you see sometimes in residential neighborhoods, like an event space. If somebody wanted to just kind of turn this into a venue, like there's one on Sutter that's in a residential neighborhood, or a B&B, not your Airbnb. Could they even, I know it would require, either of those would require a CU, I imagine, if they're even allowed. Are those allowed?
The hotel use would be allowed with conditional use authorization, but something as more of a commercial event space is generally not allowed in residential districts. In some cases, they may be more of an institutional type use and allowed as a meeting place. That's an institutional facility. But generally, if it was like a commercial activity, would not be allowed unless if it had some past historic use and it was grandfathered in as a limited commercial.
So the only thing that could be done here is under the current zoning is some form of B&B, and they'd have to come back here to a CU.
That would be the
to
closest.
get a CU to do that.
Correct. Yeah, that'd be
Which
the
I think
closest.
we would obviously. We get the neighbors' concerns about this, and I don't think there's a threat of getting a CU approved for a hotel or an Airbnb or a B&B in this spot, given what's happening. And I don't think we can presuppose, stop that now from happening. Kind of the process would have to take place. So I agree.
One thing, sorry, I would add to that is, if there was an existing residential tenant of the building, they could apply for a short-term rental authorization.
And that could be DR'd or sent to the Board of Permit. That permit could be go to the board.
Not appealable.
To the Board of Permit Appeals, is it? I thought all permits.
No, it is not a permit. So it's a certificate, and it is not an appealable document for the short-term rental authorization.
Right. So the neighbors should be aware. If somebody actually lived in it, they could apply to do a 90-day short-term rental. But if you don't live in it,
no. So under the law, without even the short-term rental authorization, they could rent it out for periods of stay that are more than 30 days, which would be maintaining it as a residential use.
Rental.
If there is an existing residential occupant, they could seek a short-term rental authorization.
Right. Okay. So I regret we can't do everything. I get the neighbors. There's traffic problems. There's double parking that we can't really lend any support, unfortunately. We can lend our vocal support, but we can't do much. But I'd support definitely sending this on to Board of Permit Appeals with a recommendation that, we take staff's recommendation, we remove the bay. I think your idea of putting the gate up, that's what I would do if I lived in the house. I'd put a gate up so people don't walk up my front stoop. And, I think the property owner should consider, trying to put himself in the position of the neighbors and as if he were an owner of the home that didn't want people to come and look at it, paint the home a different color, things we probably can't control.
If the board is inclined to require that a gate be added, that would require a preservation review. That has not been part of the project thus far. So, you could ask that they look into that, but at this point, we don't have environmental clearance for adding a gate. That would need to be reviewed by preservation staff.
Right, and what was there was a small gate at the end, not the bigger security gates you see in other places, but I'm sure either way, he'd need it. Commissioner Richards?
I guess question for the city attorney. As we do with MCDs, we require a security guard or them monitoring up to 100 linear feet on each side of the business. Could we do that here and now today?
But also, please understand too, for MCDs, it's a different, one, the Planning Commission is authorizing the land use, but two, the Department of Public Health is licensing the operator. And so those conditions regarding the security plan is similar to Entertainment Commission. They get placed by those agencies on the operator. That's
okay.
just...
So I got 3 points, tongue in cheek. We could require Mr. Franklin to live there so he experiences what the neighbors experience. Joking, because I see here that you didn't want these kind of activities affecting your life down there in Southern California. We could move the house to Pier 39 and create an attraction. Or the last one would be, I think, Mr. Franklin, the words out of your mouth where the ethos of the show is family and friends learning how to solve problems with love and friendship. I would strongly suggest that since you're making hopefully a lot of money on a very successful and artistically wonderful show, that you invest in an MTA control officer off duty and get a 13B officer to actually monitor the street on your own accord to help your neighbors with love and friendship, because these people are going to keep coming to the house and you have some level of responsibility and you're a good guy. So that's what I'd recommend. I'd make a motion to recommend to the Board of Appeals that we
We're making recommendations.
to not have the bay window and everything else.
As well as the staff recommendations, and to look at the gate.
Add a gate.
So it would be to take staff recommendations, which would, in addition to staff recommendations, have the entire removal of the bay window.
Yes.
Also ask the project sponsor to investigate adding gate and continue working with the community to resolve the issues that have come up about the kind of visitors to the site.
Commissioner Moore.
I'd like to ask the zoning administrator, by asking for a traffic control officer, is it not an admission of change in use?
No.
No? I haven't seen any residential building anywhere where, for a single residential building where you need a traffic control officer in the middle of a residential block. I'm sorry, I have not seen that. For me, that indicates an intensification and change in use.
I mean, there's no requirement that the city has for a TCO officer at this location, but certainly, I mean, it would be to encourage, and that would encourage the neighbors to talk to their supervisor, to talk to MTA to ensure that the street is actively and properly patrolled by the relative agencies.
Commissioner Richards.
So I think to Commissioner Moore's point, there is a situation in my neighborhood, it's called the Christmas tree. Every Thanksgiving, Tom and Jerry on 21st Street have a big Norfolk Island pine, and they decorate it with these enormous ornaments, and they have traffic jams there between Christmas and New Year's. They hire an SFMTA officer because the neighbors complain. It keeps traffic flowed. They're being good neighbors. That's really the example I was trying to use. Was they know they cause it's a shrine to Christmas, for lack of a better term, and they mitigate the impact.
2 weeks out of the year.
Yeah.
6 weeks.
And we've all probably driven there 4 or 5 times.
You've all seen it. Yeah.
I heard a motion. I did
Any
not hear a
seconds?
second. Thank you. If there's nothing further, Commissioners, there's a motion that has been seconded to take, to recommend to the Board of Appeals that the Board of Appeals accept staff's modifications, including adding a gate and removal of the bay window entirely. On that motion, Commissioner Fong?
Aye.
Commissioner Koppel?
Aye.
Commissioner Melgar?
Aye.
Commissioner Moore?
No.
Commissioner Richards?
I want to add, Secretary Onen, that we also recommended that the project sponsor continue to work with the neighbors on mitigation measures. The motion, that was.
We should, yeah. Is that okay with the seconder?
Yeah. Yes.
Sorry,
Just call it again.
I missed that. So on that motion then, to recommend to the Board of Appeals that they accept staff's modifications, adding a gate and look at adding a gate, removal of the bay window entirely, and recommending that the project sponsor continue working on mitigation measures. Commissioner Fong?
Aye.
Commissioner Koppel?
Aye.
Commissioner Melgar?
Aye.
Commissioner Moore? Commissioner Richards?
Aye.
And Commission President Hillis.
Aye.
So moved, Commissioners. That motion passes 5-1 with Commissioner Moore voting against.
May I ask a point of clarification about the motion?
Yeah, go ahead.
Thank you. I'm sorry to trouble you. That included the staff recommendation to remove the roof deck?
Yes.
Thank you very much.
All the stuff. That's it, Jonas?
That's all, folks.
All right, meeting's adjourned. Thank you.